Questions like, why are we here? What happens when you die? Where did we come from? And is there a God?
The U.S. government has been shown to have had a long-term interest in Scientology.
This is a practical question here.
I know this is an illusion, or dream, or call it the way you want to call, you know?
We are a bigger threat to the people who are secretly trying to control this planet than any other group on this planet.
But the problem with an atheist is he believes that his belief is based on fact.
Oh, it's wireless. Yeah, you got wireless one.
He's impressive. He's a powerful guy.
I can't make this shit up.
The leaders of this are not just after our church, they're after the whole of this planet.
He was put here to work out his own salvation. And we feel in Scientology that we've made a very big stride in that direction.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy, and isn't it lovely to be here listening to the good old Strauss? This is a podcast that has everything to do with the interesting world of Scientology. Yes, that odd religion you might have heard about. If you don't know what Scientology is, then put simply, it's a bunch of self-help books and exercises that evolved into a religion created by American sci-fi author L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s. Today's guest interview is with Johnathan Burke from the Advanced Organization of the Great Plains, revisited again. How'd you like the last show with Theo Sismanides? Now it's time for us to go down that rabbit hole into the interesting world of Scientology, where up is down and down is up, left is right, right is left. What you thought was impossible is possible. Welcome to the show on the 6th of November 2018, and there's something on my mind. Re-listening to the interview, today's interview, while I was editing it, I became a bit aware of how Scientologists feel like we have to, maybe justified is the right word, but we have to prove L. Ron Hubbard correct. We have to keep on saying, see, L. Ron Hubbard was right. And I think that has a lot to do with the black PR that's been on Scientology and on L. Ron Hubbard, the attacks that the subject and he has received. So since we're Scientologists, we sort of feel pressure to, like, any situation that comes up where we can say, look, L. Ron Hubbard was right, see, Scientology is good. Do you know what I mean? Like, any time we have the, you know, there's the opportunity to say that, we bring it up and we say it. And I think it's not that necessary. I think we just have to accept that Scientology got a bad reputation, and we don't have to continually keep on saying to people, you know, see, L. Ron Hubbard was right, L. Ron Hubbard was right. I mean, I do it all the time in my knowledge reports. But I guess my knowledge report is a little bit different in that the whole point of the video series is to counteract the amount of negative Scientology stuff there is on the internet. You know, the Chris Sheltons and the Mike Rinders. There's a lot of attacking stuff. So my videos are just a bombardment of see L. Ron Hubbard was right, see L. Ron Hubbard was right, see L. Ron Hubbard was right. But we don't want to get into the trap of doing that because we're insecure about whether or not Scientology is correct. Sometimes I think I do feel a little bit insecure about that, about trusting L. Ron Hubbard and trusting that Scientology is correct. And I do feel like I'm saying, see, Scientology is right, L. Ron Hubbard was right, because deep down I'm a little bit insecure. But I'm just getting sucked into the whole black PR thing. A similar thing probably happens to people who are fans of Trump. It's just the attacks on these people are so much, and if you're a fan of them, you almost start getting sucked into them and start not trusting their stuff. Whereas, you know, I've been looking into Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard for years and years and years, and he's like, right, I think like 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time it's like maybe he was lying for a strategic purpose in something, or it's complex. But I think a Scientologist, a person who's actually looked at it, calls himself a Scientologist, knows deep down he's actually right, and we shouldn't get sucked in by this black PR stuff and start feeling insecure and feeling like we have to say to everyone, see, L. Ron Hubbard's right. See, Daddy, L. Ron Hubbard's right. Mummy, see, look, oh, L. Ron Hubbard's right. Oh. And that sort of stuff. It's just like, you know, it's not necessary. He is right, like pretty much nearly all the time. And so we shouldn't get insecure about that. And when having a conversation with someone about Scientology, we shouldn't feel the pressure to instantly drop any excuse we can as to, see, Scientology's right, see, Ron Hubbard's right. The enemy attacked Scientology, and they gave it a bad reputation, and the group did get a little bit out of hand and stuff, and it's got a bad reputation. But things are looking up, really. They're looking better for the future. There's a whole generation of people who just aren't tuning into mainstream TV, and they're not receiving the brainwashing. And I think there's a lot of evidence that there's a mass awakening happening, really. And there's going to be a lot of people who you say you're a Scientologist, and they'll probably say, I don't know what that is. But that's probably better than them saying, ugh, Scientology, yeah, something like that. But things are looking bright, things are looking good. The enemy infiltrated the church, and it still does a lot of good. I don't regret my 5 years of experience with them. I thought it was great. And even in a corrupted form, the Church of Scientology is still going to be around. It's still going to exist. And it's still going to help people. And, of course, independent Scientology is a better version of Scientology because it's actually, you know, it's not as controlling and it's not as corrupted and stuff, and it's actually correct. You know, it's the proper red pill. It's not half a red pill. But anyway, you know, let's just set this whole desperate to make posts on Facebook about, see, L. Ron Hubbard was right, or make comments during interviews, see, L. Ron Hubbard was right. Let's just put that all aside. We don't have to be as desperate about it, you know. I'm not saying don't comment about that sort of stuff. You know, I'll probably make a comment about it tomorrow, but I think we have to face the reality that deep down that we might have a little bit of insecurity there, and it's just not necessary, and we're just getting sucked into the black PR bullshit. So personally with me, it's like bye-bye insecurity. I'm not going to start getting sucked into thinking that L. Ron Hubbard's some evil man because I listened to Chris Shelton's podcast, or I listened to some crappy documentary on TV that like made out L. Ron Hubbard to be some crazy cult leader. I'm not going to start having my opinions of L. Ron Hubbard getting watered down by this rubbish that I've seen on TV, because I think that has happened to me, because I have focused a lot on the negative information about Scientology. So I think it's like subconsciously, if I do come to read something by L. Ron Hubbard, I start to think, oh, is he being shifty or whatever? And I've thought that since day one, because since day one I got into Scientology, I'd already seen negative stuff about Scientology. And I've always had this idea, you know what I mean? But the truth is that basically what I'm saying is that the black PR has made me think less of Scientology, and it sort of happens like reactively, like subconsciously a bit. Even though I know he's like correct nearly all the time, it makes me not trust him a little bit. But that's exactly what the black PR is designed to do. So don't get sucked into it. Anyway, that was way too long, but I want to say that. Now, here is an independent Scientology success story. It's for OT1. Wow. Thought this was impossible. Thought I couldn't do it. However, I guess I really didn't think that, because here I am. These steps from LRH, seemingly innocuous directions, had a zing to them. At times my space was as big as a store Costco, and when my viewpoint shifted about people in the physical universe and I went outside, I was so big I could barely control my body, and my car seemed so tiny. But when I looked at the grade chart and I saw I had the EP without knowing ahead of time what it was, I knew unshakably that I did it. Thanks to LRH, Tom, Linda, and the people of Earth. Great. It's a good success story. And again, they don't really have names connected to these success stories. It's just a funny thing. Sometimes people just put initials, or it's just not really... I just notice with success stories of Scientology on the internet, it's hard to find. Like you see comments people will write about Scientology on the internet, and they'll be on Facebook, and you'll see their name and all that sort of stuff, and it's all clear. But success stories, somehow it's just become a thing to leave out people's names. Maybe because if they talk about personal case stuff in that success story, it's just appropriate to just sort of leave it out or something. Anyway, like you shouldn't talk about case or something like that, so you just leave the person's name out or something. Anyway, it's time for comment of the week. It's by Patricia Krennick on Facebook, and it says this. It relates a bit to the interview we're going to do today, where John talks a bit about some dramas in the free zone field, and we actually wanted to get into it a lot more, but we got distracted by all this other stuff, and I guess it just isn't that important, because otherwise, like, the universe would have made it happen, that we would have spoken about it for a longer. But I guess it is just silly dramas that aren't necessary to talk about, and it's much more interesting to hear stories about pyramids on Mars, you know? But this comment here by Patricia relates to something during the interview, so I'm going to read it out, and it says this. Regarding clients in the free zone, I know a lot of auditors in the free zone, in order to keep the peace and not step on any toes, agree to the 2-year rule. This hasn't been written anywhere before that I know of, but I'm mostly writing this because there may be auditors who haven't heard of it, and certainly there are PCs who shop around for the best bargain they can get. Of course, there is no law that says you must abide by the 2-year rule, so I thought I'd present it, and if auditors abide by this, it does help us stay in harmony in the free zone / independent field. The 2-year rules is if a Scientologist has not been online for 2 years Any auditor can pick him up and get him moving on the bridge again. There are exceptions, like when a PC is upset with another auditor and refuses to go back to him for further service. Then, of course, one isn't going to wait 2 years to fix him up. That isn't a common situation, though. Okay, that gets comment of the week. And I think I agree with that, and I think other scios do as well. It's time for a Scientology joke. How do you know if someone is a Scientologist? Because they believe everything or anything. I don't know if I really find that funny. I mean, I think I sort of get it. I mean, I guess, in this podcast, I say the line, nothing is impossible. So that's sort of saying I believe everything or anything. But I think this is a little bit of an attacking joke. I think it's like that thing where I get sometimes people attack me on YouTube and they'll say that comment where, Andy, you believe in every conspiracy, which isn't true at all. But I think this joke is sort of implying a similar thing that people say about conspiracy theorists, that they believe in everything. They believe every conspiracy. And it's just like, nah. Anyway, I think it's kind of cool. Scientologists believe everything or anything. Ooh. Anyway, it's time for today's guest interview with Johnathan Burke. This is another, one of those big, more than 3 hour long ones. I don't think he drops as many exciting bombs as previous interviews, as it's happened in previous interviews. We definitely talk about interesting stuff. I think this one is a little bit more of a peaceful one because, I guess, even though when I interviewed him in a series of interviews, when I did 3 or 4 in a row, there was so much to ask him. So it was like each one was under the pump and it was like, boom, boom, got to get these done in these 3 interviews. It was just like there was so much to ask him. This one's a bit more of a relaxed one. It's like, oh, yeah, there's not much time pressure. Although, of course, even at the end of this, I still did have a bunch of things I didn't ask him, but they just weren't too important. But this is a little bit more slower, but it's nicer. It's more peaceful, but it's still got some real interesting information in it. So let's dig into this, put on a pot of tea, and let's hear some talk about the world's most interesting and controversial religion, Scientology. Okay, today's guest interview is with Johnathan Burke, the commanding officer, you could call it, or ED. What do you like to call it?
ED's fine.
The ED of the Advanced Organization of the Great Plains over in the good old USA. He's an auditor, and he is maybe the first person to start online Scientology courses. Is that correct?
As far as I know, we are.
Yeah, and so that's pretty cool because you can study Scientology online. I'm going to talk to him today a little bit about that. So, John, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. It's good to speak to you again.
Andy.
There was a bit of drama with booking today's interview, wasn't there?
It's been, 4 weeks?
Yeah, lots of stops were coming in, and it's probably some sort of OSA activity or something. What dramas were you having happen?
Let's see. Internet connectivity problems. Unusual internet connectivity problems that we don't normally have. Weird emails.
What would you say the weird emails are?
From people I've never heard of before that have seen, the earlier podcasts we've done, or other podcasts I've done and stuff like that. Just really bizarro stuff.
What were they trying to do? Waste your time by reading the email, or what?
Actually, it seemed like kind of pull me away from the subject and get me interested in something else. That was
so some weird sort of Satanist stuff or something like that.
If it was Satanist, I didn't notice it. But
no, but I mean, like, they want you to get interested in 9/11 or Satanism or like the moon landings or something different.
Anything other than Scientology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that would be the common denominator. Several of those lately, since we started the online course room. We've had lots of unusual people contact us about services, flaps with those people. I mean, just something we've never had a problem with in the past. So, and, I mean, even LRH says, you're going to get crazies on your lines every now and then, but I mean, I've never experienced that up until this last year, so I really can't comment on it other than I find it highly unusual because it's never been a problem in the past.
Well, I think that makes sense, though, because you started these online courses, and it's a good idea, and it's something that I can just see being a real, big thing, a big success.
Yeah, we've got, over 60 people enrolled on courses.
Yeah, it's just so convenient, and because especially with, Indie Scientology, it's not like every city we've got our own org or anything,
Right.
It's
you can
just
be in the middle of the Sahara, and as long as you've got a decent internet connection, you can be doing a Scientology course, either a basic course or a mid-level course or a professional course. I mean, it's really groundbreaking.
Yeah, I don't think the church would like that, and even if maybe, let's say they, somehow destroy your website or something like that, other people are going to be inspired by that, and next minute maybe Ron's org will have their own online course section or something like that, and so it's just a great idea.
Yeah, they should. I mean, we're not real concerned about ours going anywhere because it's backed up 6 different ways from Sunday, so that's not we're not real concerned about that unless we get put back in the Dark Ages or something like that, Stone Age type thing. As long as we've got electricity, it'll be up. And we've spent, probably close to 1,200 man-hours putting courses on there, and we're not done yet. We're shooting for 50 courses. We're at 30 right now.
Great.
So it's moving right along. We've slowed down on it a little bit just for the fact that we've been busy delivering services, but the cool thing is that all of our students for AOGP are doing their courses on there as well. So I could go into it ad nauseum as to why it's such a great tool, but the main thing is that it's accessible by everyone. We've offered scholarships to people. It's really, really a whole new world for people if they want to do Scientology.
Yeah, it is. It's good. I mean, I've been doing the Data Evaluators course, and years ago when I was studying in the church, I thought, I could be doing this at home. But now I'm doing this course at home. I wasn't studying the Data Evaluators course at the church or anything.
Right.
But as long as you're a careful student, you can do it at home, and it's a lot more convenient, like especially with phones and laptops where you can have a few dictionaries and the apps, and you've got access to the internet and Wikipedia and all that sort of stuff, and so you can really study well. I mean, yeah, you probably you're open to more distractions when you're at home as opposed to a course room. But when you think about it, there's distractions in the course room as well. So it just depends on your attitude. But I think it's good, and I'm looking forward to getting more of the course that I'm doing done. I had to buy my own clay demo, my own clay pretty much, and make my own demo kit, which isn't really that hard. And I just had to get a space set up, like a big desk, because with clay demos you need a bit of space.
Sure.
But yeah, it's fine. It's good, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about how to find out the truth. I mean, what would you summarize the data evaluators course as doing?
Truthfully, I would say that the DSCC is an administrative OT level. And I can say that unreservedly. It is and this might be a bit of a blasphemy for me to say this for some people, but it is some of LRH's best work, quite frankly.
That's not what Chris Shelton said when he gave a review on it.
What did Chris say?
And this is what's also good about studying when you got access to a laptop at home. Because when I was studying it, I started studying the course and I was like, hold on a second. I want to know what I'm studying, you know what I mean? I want to read some reviews on it. I just want to have a bit more background info and stuff. And so I looked up some things. And it's funny with Chris Shelton because a lot of the time he'll be attacking Scientology, but I'll be like taking the opposite of what he's saying. And I'll be like, oh yeah, this is like I use his videos, but in like an inverted way, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But
he flipped the script.
Oh, he just said that it teaches you how to be illogical when the course really teaches you how to be logical. I think that essentially that was something that he was saying, and he was just doing nitpicky things where they pick silly reasons as to why, Anyway, what were you saying?
You just kind of flip the script on him when you do the interviews.
What do you mean? Oh, me? Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
You're interviewing him, but you're using the data in a different way. You're kind of using a jiu-jitsu or judo move on him to take the momentum and use it in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that I've heard him interview some other people like about economics, and I know that Chris doesn't know that much. I just know it. I've listened to his thingos, and so whenever he says something, it's like, well, I was thinking that you're wrong, and you are wrong. Like, it's just, yeah, anyway.
Right. Well, like I was saying, the data evaluators course, it's not that it's just to teach you how to be an evaluator or have an unjaundiced eye when looking at a situation and how far it deviates from what's called an ideal scene.
What does unjaundiced mean?
Where you have a bias.
Okay, yeah.
To have a jaundiced eye would be to have a bias when you're looking at something. Sort of like the inverse of LRH's hypnosis drill. That's what you would have until you do the hypnosis drill. Then you would have an unjaundiced eye as you do the hypnosis drill.
Is the hypnosis drill an admin tech thing?
No, the hypnosis drill is actually an HCOB that you actually use on level 0. It teaches you to take a look at something without any preconceived ideas. You see, you get a guy to go out with you and he's never done the drill before, and you ask him, well, what do you see? And he says, well, I see this person's doing this and they're really nervous and they're worried. And you go, okay, no. What do you see? And you just get them to look at things as they are without any preconception, without any bias, because a lot of it is dubbing, and it gets them to look at things from an auditor's viewpoint of looking at a person's indicators instead of filling it in and dubbing it in with what they think is going on with the person.
I noticed ones can do that a lot. They can dub in just some outrageous things and personal biases.
Sure. Well, I mean, that goes. I mean, you can take that drill, and if you wanted to, you could use the hypnosis drill to go out with somebody who didn't know that you were doing it, and you could take it into a public place, and you could ask them what they see, and you could write down what it is or memorize it, or you could even record it on a smartphone, an iPhone, without buying any new applications, because there's an app on an iPhone, and I think there is for Android now too. And you could take them out and just have them tell you what they see about people, and you could run that up against the chart of human evaluation, and you'd have a pretty darn good idea of what that person's tone level was just by having them go out and do an hypnosis drill. You could just do it without doing the hypnosis drill and just have a conversation with them and have them answer questions about things that they see or what they think and things like that. But that's not what the drill is for, but you could do that.
That is, that would be a great way, because I just noticed with twinning in the past with someone who was 1-1. You can really get an idea of what tone level they are by what ideas they have about other people and what dub in they just add into things and stuff.
Right. Well, that's the thing with the DSCC course is you're getting. I mean, it's really hard in the beginning for somebody that's doing the Data Evaluators course, or even reading it. It took me years to read it and really understand it, because he breaks it down so simplistically that you sort of have to reverse engineer the way that you look at things and the way you perceive things. And that's what the Data Series Evaluators course is all about, is getting you to look at things from the viewpoint of an ideal scene and how far they depart from that ideal scene. But the catch is, if you don't know something about a scene, a situation, you have to imbue yourself into that situation well enough and understand it so that you know what the ideal scene is. Now, it's not hard to do, but if you were doing some high math thing, or if you were going to the Hadron Collider or something like that, well, it would take you a while, because you'd need to really understand something about physics. But it gives you the ability to understand things rapidly. And that's, study tech notwithstanding, because you need to look up your words and stuff if you don't understand something, obviously. But it is an OT level for the admin side of the bridge. There's no doubt about it. And it will take any person and turn them into a person who can look at any situation, whether it's with their own life or with somebody else's, and turn that thing around within minutes. That's what this course does. Is it's applying logic and the lack thereof that you're peeling away in such tiny little increments that are so accurate. It's like using a laser pointer. So I highly recommend it for everybody. We ask all of our students to do the DSEC when they're on the OT levels, because it's one of the things that will keep them out of the trap from an application side, from a doing this side, not just from an auditing negative gain side. It puts them at cause, just like the Philadelphia Doctorate course does. So I highly recommend it to everyone.
I feel like it's a continuation of study tech, because to me it's like study tech teaches you how to investigate, like how to study, how to look into things. And then this is just like a higher level gradient of it, and it's like, okay, now that you can read, basically, now let's apply this ability to investigate. Now that you can I don't know what the word is, but it's like, now that you can research reading or study reading, now apply it to actual life situations with the Data Evaluators course.
Right. It's the next tier
of logic or something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree completely, because you're able to take the building blocks of communication, concepts, symbols, and words, because words are symbols themselves, and then take those and then apply it to life and what's going on in life, and you can look at any situation. And what I did with the course when we put it on Stanford Tech Academy is the actual check sheet from the SO didn't have a practical, which was mind-blowing to me for something like this course, because this is a course where you have to have a practical in order for the person to really get their hands dirty and get under the hood. You know, like he says, you know, if you're teaching somebody about tractors, then you got to give them a tractor, you got to give them some math. And one of the references on the DSEC, and this is kind of a mind blower, is I forget what the number is. It's in the past midway in the data series. It's probably in the 40s, I believe. And it is called the ideal org. I'm sure everybody's heard that expression here in the last 10, 15 years. And the ideal org it's literally a data series, HCOPL, about what an ideal org is. And we took the practical and decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take the ideal org HCOPL, and we're going to apply the data series evaluated course with the ideal org PL in mind, and have the student do a full and complete eval on that same policy and what the church is doing in not applying the ideal org HCOPL and how far off the reservation they've gone with that bulletin. Because that's the bulletin that they're using to justify turning Scientology into a real estate acquisition firm.
So there's practicals to look forward to.
Yeah, the practical is to use the data series evaluator course and the ideal org data series PL itself and apply it to the, if you will, to use a photography term, the negative of what the church is using that PL, how far they've misconstrued a data series PL and turned it into their justification for building new orgs, using parishioners' money and then renting the org back to the organization itself, the building, back to the organization itself after they've pilfered from the pockets of the donators to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. Does that make sense to you, or do I need to break it down?
No, it makes sense.
Okay.
I think the ideal scene is a big thing, because when I think back to me prior to getting involved with Scientology, I seem to have some sort of idea about ideal scenes with things, and I'll be like looking at things in the WOG world, and I'll be like, that's not how things should be. Like, you know, a lot of time it's like, that's not how things should be. And so I can see how if someone doesn't have a sense of how things should be, then they could put up with anything. They could be doing, people could be walking around calling themselves spaghetti monsters, wearing nappies all the time, and they wouldn't see anything wrong with it because they don't have any idea of an ideal scene. So it's like, I can just see how that it's just an important thing as to spotting out points and working out what's going on. Like, for example, with the news, if you have no idea about what the ideal scene is with the news, which is that they should just report the truth and not opinion, and also report a variety of different things, you'd just be like, oh, that's the news, and I mean, it'd just be an interesting way of being, but it makes me sort of think that there's, I have connections to my past life and memories, I guess, of how things should be, and it's like carrying forth the personalities or attitudes, they stay with me, and I'm like, hold on a second, that seems wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, throughout history, things haven't been as screwy in some areas as others, and different civilizations have screwy thinking on certain things where other civilizations do not. I mean, the Romans, for example, were incredibly capable of being warriors, but they weren't the ones that the technology that they had, very little of that technology was their own technology. Was they pretty much got everything they knew from the Greeks. They just knew how to tweak it a little bit better and make it more ideal than the Greeks did. So, you can have things passed down and it stays unaberrative, but the Romans, what ended up killing them was all of the wacky 2D stuff that they got into. That was their undoing. Almost every civilization has that problem, but not every civilization has the same problem, and some of them are a lot healthier than others. This planet being the exception, I think. But the evaluator's course is something that you can use in any walk of life, with any situation, with any person, with yourself. I just don't know I can't think of any other way to put it than it's something that everybody should do. And if they had, Scientology would not be in the situation that it's in. It allows you to confront evil without getting case involved, because you're looking at statistics, you're looking at facts, you're looking at the data itself. And if you don't have enough data, it shows you how to find that data as well. So, anyway.
Yeah, I've only done about 10% of it, but yesterday, and this is probably what some of the benefits are of studying at home, I had like a realization, and I just stopped studying because it was a fairly big realization. I needed to just stew on it because I was just like, oh my God.
Right, enjoy your win.
Yeah, I don't know if you can really do that when you're studying in the church, in the course room, but
no, not really, but that's okay,
But yeah, I mean,
fine.
It was just a sort of, I don't know, I guess it was charge blowing and stuff. It was just like, just like,
well, that's what I'm
whoa.
saying, is it's an OT level, but in an admin sense. I mean, you'll have tens, if not, God, you might have 100 or more divisions of TA, maybe even a couple hundred for some individuals on this course. It is that life-changing. And what you experienced is one of those wins in doing it. I mean, and you haven't even gotten to the meat and potatoes yet. Just wait.
Yeah, so, I mean, this wasn't even really relevant. The realization wasn't really relevant to the course. It was just more about surviving, and it was something out of the Factors book. So it's something you could come across in other Scientology stuff, but it was just an interesting thing. And what I noticed was I was like, as I was having the realization, I was having charge and stuff, but I was like, hold on a second, am I going through like lack of mass phenomena or something like that? I was thinking, is this study tech phenomena that I'm going through? But I was just like, my knowingness was like, no, this is charge, like this was a case thing. Like this was like, auditing.
Right. Yeah. And you'll find that, and there's actually even a correction list that's part of the data series where somebody can't think logically that you can do to repair somebody who is having a hard time studying the course. That's how fundamental it is, and that those are the building blocks that you're dealing with. So,
is that normal for do 4 courses to have if someone runs into problems to actually have a session on it?
Well, I mean, you can correct anybody on any given course with various correction lists. I mean, what I've seen before, I've never experienced it myself as a supervisor, but I've seen it in course rooms where I was a student with other students, where somebody needed to have a correction list run on them on a course that they were doing for various reasons. I mean, could be any number of reasons, but it is pretty common for people to have things occur on course where they might need a correction list, where something, you stick your finger in a hole in a dam, and then another hole occurs and the water pops out. So it's not that unusual to have something like that happen, but it just depends on the subject being studied.
But what about, I mean, does the student have its own correction list, or what were you saying? No,
there isn't a correction list for the student hat per se, but the the main correction list that you would have would be like a word clearing correction list that you could help somebody with something, or you could have false data stripping. It could be done on anybody that had received false data on any particular topic. Any word clearer is going to be anybody that's a professionally trained word clearer would have the ability to do that, and that is a life-changing thing too. Crashing MU finding is another one.
But what were you saying? What were you saying that the data evaluators course had again? It had its own correction list.
It has its own correction list for a person who can't grasp
the concepts,
the fundamentals, the concepts of the data evaluators course.
Well, what about? But that's not that common. Like in some of the other courses, like Student Hat and like other ones, they don't really have that.
No, ProTRs has its own correction list. I don't know if that one made it into the 91 Tech Falls or not, but it used to. I'm trying to think of any other course that would. Method 1 really doesn't, but the word clearing correction list would handle that if there was any problem on that. Those are the big ones. Now, if you wanted to get technical, you could say that all of the OT levels, OT2, OT3, and the OT6 is just a course itself, but OT2 and 3 have their own correction lists, and that's for the solo auditor. But OT1, OT2, OT3, and OT6 Part A and B all have their own correction lists, because those are courses to learn how to audit those particular actions. So they all have their own correction lists. So you see that more so on the upper end of the bridge because it's pretty stimulative material. But on the lower end of the bridge, you wouldn't see that so much. I mean, there's Happiness Rundown has its own correction list. That'd be another one, but that's for the auditing side of it, not the training side. So Key to Life had its own particular correction list, also word clearing correction list, or Series 53, depending on what was going on with the person. Clay table auditing itself, like for the new clay table auditing for ProTRs that was released in the 90s with the Golden Age of Tech, had its own correction list. So those are really the only ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. But the data evaluators course is so fundamental, it required its own correction list, and it handles any of the problems that a person would have in thinking logically. That's basically what it addresses.
When it comes to studying and you might be blowing charge, is there a sort of way you can sort of tell that if you got study like an MU phenomena or if you're just blowing charge? Because with me, it was sort of because I felt like I understood what I was reading and I had a cognition, so it seemed like it was charge that I was going through.
Well, I think primarily if you feel good about something that you're reading and you feel a little bit lighter and you're up-toned, then you're getting something positively from whatever it is that you're studying. But, I mean, you can also be really keyed out. I had to take several walks when I was on my levels at Flag, especially early on level 0. What was the other one? ProTRs, I had to go take a walk on a couple of times when I was doing the Wall of Clay, doing all the clay demos for the 2 chapters of Dynex 55. Because you get so blown out, you just, I gotta go take a walk. You feel like you've got a floating tone arm, and you just kind of just can't handle it anymore in a positive way, and you're just so keyed out. That there's nothing wrong with that. One of the problems that you run into with students who haven't done Method 1 word clearing, done the co-auditor received the word clearing, is they don't know when they've passed the misunderstood word, and so they get bogged down easier. And Method 1 word clearing hinders the case so that when you hit an MU, you know you hit an MU. And that black cloud just comes right over the horizon, and you know that you need to stop and go back and find your word, where otherwise it'll just kind of slip by and go under the door or under the rug, and it's way down in the course further that you realize you have an MU. Whereas if you've done Method 1, you're going to know right away. And that really helps with wins for students, because it unburdens them so that they don't get MUs and they can get much bigger gain from it as far as actually comprehending the material and having a conceptual understanding of it. And that was also LRH's goal with Key to Life as well, which from another angle was to undercut the degradation in the society as far as education was concerned. So it depends on which angle you're looking at. But, the more data you get, the more you understand, the bigger wins that you'll have, basically. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah. And study tech is really key. I went to a meetup with Rosicrucians recently. I only studied it for 2 months ages ago, and so they had some thing on. So I thought I'll just go along to one of their things and see. And they're not, as a group, they're not growing. What was really interesting is at the end of it, they started talking, and because there was only 2 new people there, it was sort of almost in-house talking. And they started talking about how they're not growing, and they said, the Freemasons aren't growing, and the Theosophical Society aren't growing, and a lot of the members there, the average age was quite old. There was no kids there and stuff. It actually made me think better of the church, because I thought there is more young people involved with the church. If you go in there, in Melbourne you will actually see kids and stuff. Yes, the course rooms only have 3 people in them, and it's not like what it was supposed to be and what it was in the 70s.
Right.
But even as the corrupted organisation it is, I still think it's going to hang around. I still think it's still going to be around. Whereas I was looking at the Rosicrucians, and there was some other group I'd been to as well, something else where, I went to a Christian Science Sunday service. I wanted to check it out, and I mean, it was the average age was 70, and the amount of people was 5. It was so small. It was absolutely dying and dead. And so with this Rosicrucian thing I went to, it was interesting because young people just aren't going to get into it. You know what I mean? Firstly, it's not as exciting as interesting as Scientology, but also you have the whole MU barrier. And the guy who was holding the event was talking. He was saying, he goes, kids don't read these days, and the education system is so bad now that kids cannot read. And so it's almost like Scientology is the only thing that's going to, of spiritual teachings and all that sort of stuff, that's going to survive, because kids can actually adopt it, whereas these other things, they go in and they go to study some Rosicrucian stuff, and they just hit all MU phenomena, and
and they just hit a wall.
Yeah, they can't get anywhere. And the guy who was running it he was saying, my kids just like playing with devices and stuff, and they want quick, fast little things. And he goes, the youth today just don't read. There's a huge difference in reading ability between my grandparents' generation and my generation. They could actually read. They actually knew what words meant. You know what I mean? And anyway, it was kind of interesting seeing, because I was kind of it made me realize how much cooler Scientology is, and how with study tech it's Scientology is, I just don't think it's ever going to go away on Earth, even if things sort of get worse or whatever. It's always going to be there. Whether or not we're ever going to clear the planet is another story, but it's just got too many survival factors, even in its corrupted form. You go to the Melbourne church, the Ideal Org and everything, and you'll see little kids around and stuff. You know what I mean? It's still got too many survival things in there, so it's going to hang around.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a testament to the technology that you can mess it up so much as they already have, and people still get as much gain as they do from it. That says a lot about the stalwartness of the technology and its strong bones, if you will. And I've seen that for years and years and years. And the downside of that is what you see going on in the field to kind of shift gears here a little bit in that direction, is you see a lot of squirrely, nutty things going on, and people just kind of taking one little thing here, one little thing there from Scientology, and then they still call it Scientology. And that is something that I think you will continue to see, and there's no way to stop it. And, you know, hey, if that's what they want to do, that's fine. That's not what I want to do. That's not what we want to do. It's the field is a mess, exponentially more than it was 10 or 15 years ago because of this. The same phenomena that you're talking about is MUs and wanting to experiment and create their own thing, and, you know, just kind of riff on it and that sort of a thing. But you still see people getting gains from it to a lesser degree, but they're still having more wins with the altered stuff than they ever had with anything else. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it'll be around, but whether it'll be around in its original form is something that concerns us, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you got the like the avatar groups and the landmarks and stuff, and they've gone off, and they still seem like really interesting things that people can get some big wins from, and they're still around and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's probably 50 of them, if not more, that are all offshoots from what originally were. Well, you know, Scientology is a distillation of multiple lines of thought and then improved upon in some in small ways, some in greater ways. Some of the things have been put together, and they're not just bungee cords and duct taped together. They've been really actually turned into entire schools of thought in Scientology. The study tech of the MU phenomena and everything wasn't a Scientology created thing. It was something Ron heard. I forget what the gentleman's name is, but Ron had gotten from somebody else, and then he went down that path and improved it and improved it and improved it. The meter was used, and I mean, without study tech, we wouldn't have the OT levels. I mean, just period, paragraph. So, you know, things can be improved upon. I'm not saying that they can't be improved upon, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And
yeah, I mean, that's why, because I've tried the beginning course of Avatar, and you don't learn study tech and stuff. So I could do it because I was a Scientologist, and I totally could fit into Avatar, and I could read it. It was not too high gradient, and I could think with it, the information, and you know, have realizations and stuff. But then there's someone who didn't know anything about any of this stuff, and he's sitting there and he's reading this stuff, and he's not taught about MUs and that sort of stuff, and he was trying to make sense of it. I could see how he was frustrated with the illogicalness that was going on, because there was illogicalness going on. I could handle it because I could just experience that and stuff.
Yeah, you were picking it up.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think he was picking up the illogicalness of it, and so he was just like, I remember some girl was trying to make him continue to sign up, and I can tell he just thought that this is sort of stupid, and he's kind of right. But the funny thing is, it's just like, you know, even somebody goes and they change Scientology and they take out the real important thing, and it's like that Avatar group, by not having the study tech in there, in 100 years' time, they'll just end up being like the Rosicrucians, where someone new will come in and they just can't even read it, you know?
Right, yeah, and it just kind of metamorphosizes into something else and never ever returns to looking like or being the thing that it started out to be. And you know, it's a testament to the Catholic religion, and, you know, some of these ones that have been around for a really long, long time, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and everything like that, because they do have some successful actions. You know, the Bible, to a certain degree, hasn't been changed in many, many hundreds of years, but as to who wrote it and where they came from, and if they were just assembled stories that were all put in one book, etc., etc. Even for it being what it very likely is, it really hasn't changed much over the ages. So, if they can do it, we can do it. And the only thing that limits us is having acid-free paper and having something to protect that isn't going to burn it or something like that. Or, you could even go as far as to say, well, what the church said that they were doing, which I don't believe they did, by putting all of the bulletins on metal plates so that you can have them and then you can carry them over. That would be one way to protect the tech, but because, electrons are fragile things, and if you don't have something that can be turned on 100 years from now and it's in the same state that it was when it was created, the tech could be gone, and it could be gone for a very, very long time. And the only way to keep it around is to train people properly and make sure that they train people after them, the people after them, and so on and so forth, and pay it forward. And that is something that we really have to drive home and get people to do. And I'm not saying that everybody has to be a Scientology zealot, but I am saying that they need to do these things right and not get reasonable. And just because he said it isn't reason to do it that way. The reason to do it is because it works the way he said that it works. And that's what he pushes home on the Class 8 course. Is standard tech is really, really simple. And if you do it right, you get amazing results, and you don't do anything but what you're supposed to do, and you don't go looking for some other answer. And that's the direction that the field is going in at a rapid rate, and people are selling things that aren't Scientology. And that is something that we are really trying to work towards in getting people to do standard tech. That would be the best way to put it. And be friendly about it and make Scientology fun again, and not make it this draconian, thou shalt not do anything but breathe when we tell you to type of philosophy.
It kind of reminds me a bit of like the American Constitution, where you have these SPs come in and stuff things up, and then they say, see, we need to change the Constitution now. So it's like in the late 70s, Scientology started going bad, and then it's like, oh, now we have to go start up something else. And it's just like, no, you need to go back to what it was before. You know, it's just so obvious.
This obsessive change thing going on. And that's, a lot of that is handled on the OT2 course or on the clearing course. Because it's an aberration. It's part of the R6 bank. And that is why this planet is the way that it is. And you see the insanities going on that are promoted in the media, obviously to get advertising dollars and things like that. But these insanities are promoted by bank agreement and bank creation, and that yes is no, and no is yes, and love is hate, and hate is love. John Lennon brought these things up, and he wasn't a Scientologist, though people did try to get him into Scientology. There are people that understand these concepts, but you have to really hit it home with people that life can be fun, life can be easy, and you don't have to hate your neighbor and distrust everyone. And you can care about people and take care of people and not worry about people stabbing you in the back. But it's all this banky bullshit that goes on with people. And you're not going to get rid of that without doing the things that Scientology can help you do, by staying on the straight and narrow until you get to a point to where you rise up out of the swamp and you can see the actual sky, and you're not looking at the sky through the swamp.
With I want to just mention a little bit more about the study tech.
Sure.
I personally, and this relates because we're talking about how people want to change the tech or whatever, and someone maybe like Alan Walter or Harry Palmer, and they want to take this and say, oh, this is good, and modify it and stuff, and whatever they've created is good, but it's like, I don't know if it's going to be as good as Scientology, but This idea I have, like, there's with lack of mass, for example. I feel like Harvard hasn't put enough information into that idea, and I looked at what was on the student hat policy or whatever course, and I don't know if it needs a forced barrier to study or if more information needs to get put into lack of mass. But what I find I run into is that I'll be studying something and I call it lack of mass, but I go, I don't have mass on this, like as in I don't have personal experiences in life on this, or I don't have memories in my mind of this that enables me to understand it. Like I can't think of examples in my own life.
Right, because you don't have any comparable magnitude. If somebody says, well, I put a marble in the door to stop it from closing, and you've never seen or heard of a marble, you don't even know what the word means. I mean, you're just completely drawing a blank until somebody shows you a marble. So I completely understand that. And that, that is a complete lack of mass. But what it really is underneath it is a no definition. That's a type of misunderstood word. And one of the things that a person needs to understand when they're studying something is if they don't know that they don't know something, they're not going to know that they don't know something.
Yeah.
And that actually undercuts what you're talking about, is you've got to get a person to know that they don't know. Now this, LRH covers this on the briefing course lectures on study, which are part of the student hack course. But the thing is that there's actually these levels that have been developed where a person doesn't know that they don't know, or they know that they don't know, which comes above that. You've got conscious competence, unconscious incompetence, conscious, what is it? I'm trying to remember all of the different levels, but I mean, there's not that many of them. There's 4 or 5. And the thing is that you have to get a person up to that they know they don't know something, because like I said before in some of the earlier podcasts that we've done, LRH mentions that the hardest thing to spot is a missingness. Well, this is very true from the aspect of, if you don't know what a marble is, you don't know that you don't know what a marble is. And then you don't know what a marble is. And then you know what a marble is. And then you know what a marble consists of. And then you know what you can use a marble for and what you can't use a marble for. And you know that a marble can be harmful and you can slip on it, much like a Lego in the middle of the night, that sort of a thing. And then as you get older and you have all of these different experiences, like when from you're a little kid to when you're like 45, 50, 60 years old, and you've seen all of these different things, you've met all of these different people, you've spotted all these different tone levels, you've heard all of these different types of words, you've seen all of these types of situations, you've seen all of the different types of faces there are in the world, and you come to the realization that, wow, there's only so many different types of looking people, or there's only so many different games that people play as aberrative games. Once in a while you might see the really unusual aberrative game, but this sort of a thing. And this comes from comparable magnitudes. The more comparable magnitudes a person has, the more they can conceptually conceive of solutions to problems, and they can also conceptually conceive of problems. So,
This is where I'm saying how the data evaluators course is like a more higher version of the student hat.
Yeah, it is. It's basically, the data evaluators course is basically above student hat and key to life, because to the degree that you can understand these concepts is to the degree that you could rule the world in a positive sense. You could be not just the voice, but the motion. I don't want to say force because that sounds overly aggressive, but if enough people did the data evaluators course and understood these concepts, this world would go from insane to sane in short order. You just have to get enough people to rise above the bank and apply these datums. because the ideal scenes are what this planet is lacking. We have more than enough non-ideal scenes, but we have very few people that have an idea of what the ideal scene could be. And that's what the Data Evaluators course does, is it gives you the ability to take it from a non-ideal scene to an ideal scene. And Student Hat does the same thing, only in a much smaller scale. From being a non-student and a non-studier and not knowing how to study to knowing how to study appropriately. And every step on the training side of the bridge, every step on the auditing side of the bridge is made up of the Data Evaluators course. I kid you not.
Sorry, what was that? Can you say that again?
I said every step on the training side and every step on the processing side is made up of the data in the Data Evaluators course.
All right.
That's how simplistic
it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty deep. Yeah, well, that's why I'm happy I'm studying it, and it seems really interesting. It seems like something that's really useful if you're like looking into, let's say, the UFO topic, because it's like there's so much like, well, how can I trust this person? How can I trust that information? And it's such a difficult thing to look into, you know?
Right. Well, he talks about, when you get further into the course, he talks about trusted sources on the Data Evaluators course. Trusted sources. You hear that all the time in the news media. You know, trusted sources gave us this information. Well, who's your trusted source? Because the data that anybody has on something, if I said to you, there's an atmosphere on the moon, could you confirm or deny that without being a high scientist, knowing about spectrometry and all of these different sciences that go into them spotting these planets because of gravitational pull and the light and the colors and the wavelengths of light, which are the same thing basically, that these planets are putting off and are bending light from? You know, there would be no way that you could either confirm or deny that. So all you know is that there's a moon there, and we see one side of it. Now, the other thing that you would also do on the Data Evaluators course is you would compare our moon to the moons of every other planet in the system, and you would soon find out that our moon is the only moon that does not spin on its axis of any moon to any planet in this system. That is the definition of an outpoint. So that's how you start to take this whole thing apart, is by having comparable magnitudes. There's no other moon in the system that doesn't spin on its axis except ours. Why is that?
Yeah, so if you're interested in the truth and you're a bit of a conspiracy theorist, something like the Data Evaluators course is like so down your alley, and that's why, you know, partially I want to do it, you know, because it's just you get hit with so many things, like, do we have bases on Mars? You know, I mean, so many things, and you're like, well, what's the truth, you know? Right.
Well, I mean, you know, in bringing up Mars, if you wanted to compare Mars as far as the datums that are given that NASA will tell us, for example, they say, well, you know, the Martian atmosphere just recently completed a planetary size dust storm. Okay, so when we have a dust storm on Earth, you have an atmosphere with oxygen and other components, but primarily oxygen, you know, and a few small other elements, hydrogen, etc. So Mars supposedly has a very thin atmosphere. It's not a dense atmosphere at all. So one has to ask the question, how is it that there could be any dust storm on the planet itself at all? And how can you have these derechos, which are these big mile-high wall clouds of dust, in an atmosphere that is a fraction as thick as planet Earth's? Well, somebody's lying. Yeah. Because that's just not possible, and there is an atmosphere on Mars. They just don't want us to know it. So that's another way, you know, another data series thing is, you know, similarities aren't similar. Well, these similarities are similar. So you have to look at the inverse of these out points as well to actually find the datums. But you're exactly on the right track.
It reminds me of like a course for someone being an intelligence agent.
Yeah.
And with the Mars thing as well, like they'll have they'll say it's too hot or something, and then they'll say that there's a polar ice cap, and then you go, well, hold on a second. That means that there'll be an area halfway between the equator and the polar ice cap where the temperature will be normal.
Yeah, well, it'll be at its warmest, like it is here. Now, the difference between Mars and Earth is the Earth is bent on its axis. Mars is not. So that's part of the issue where you've always got this constant band that doesn't change and move north some and then move south some and move north some and move south some like we do here, because we're on a canted axis, whereas on Mars it isn't. So
makes you wonder who got that started.
Well, right. And LRH talks about it on the briefing course as well, as to how you can have woolly mammoths that were basically flash frozen in the matter of a few moments, and he suggests that the atmosphere was pulled off of the planet and that somebody did it on purpose. Well, that may or may not be. I can neither confirm or deny that. I tend to believe a lot of the things that LRH says as opposed to disbelieve them. But it is also known that the Earth's magnetic north has been shifting further and further and further south, and that the Inuit Eskimos have told NASA that, hey, look, this thing's moving a lot faster than you guys think it is, and we're in for a big change. How big of a change that is, I don't know, but it has happened before, and they know this because of the iron samples, where they can actually show when it's changed in the iron as far as its polarity. So, there are a lot of things that go on that we don't have any comparable magnitude on. The global warming, for example, climate change. One of the omitted facts that you don't see on this planet in the news media about it is that the temperature on every other planet in the system and moons is rising at the same speed as it is here on Earth.
Hmm.
So that begs the question, well, what's going on? Well, that's because we're moving into a much more energetic part of our galactic plane that we're moving into, because the whole solar system spins like a corkscrew.
Hmm.
And as it's spinning like a corkscrew, it does a sine wave through the more charged, more particleized, faster particles. Almost, if you want to call it heat, you could call it heat. But we're going through a sine wave where we're going through this vortex, if you will, on the galactic plane, where we're passing through the more energetic area, and then we pass up through it, and then we come back down on the other side of the sine wave, or the hill, back on the slope, and then the whole thing starts again. And that's when you see at the bottom of the sine wave and then at the top where it curves, this is generally where you get your polar periods, where things get a lot colder. And then when you go through the warmer, more energized area of the galactic plane, that's where you see things heat up and the ice caps melt and everything like that. Not just here, it's happening on Mars. I mean, they just recently found open water on the surface of Mars. Why? Because it's heating up just like it is here, but they're not correlating. So this is where you can take the data evaluators course and not just look at it on a local level here on Earth, but if you look at it, compare it to the data that you can get, what data is available, even though it's spun, you can get enough to go, hey, there are correlations here, and we're not being told the whole truth. One of the other things that happened with Mars was when the Viking landers went up there in the 70s, they had a U.S. flag that they put on the actual lander itself. And whenever NASA creates a ship, they have mock-ups that they create that they actually have at JPL or in Florida at the Space Center, a couple other places. And what this guy did is he used color correcting technology to match the same flag. This is a decal that was put on Viking. Match those colors up from that flag from the mock-up that was at, I believe it was in Houston, and then took those colors and then corrected them for what was on the Viking landers on Mars. There's 2 of them. And when he did that, the sky was blue. And the reason why the sky was blue... The reason why the sky was blue is because it's an oxygenated atmosphere, just like our own, and they color correct it to make it red, to make it seem like it isn't an oxygenated atmosphere.
How clever is that? I mean, NASA would be like, damn, that guy is switched on.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing, is that there are so many things that are right under our nose that you don't see if you don't have the data. I'm not saying this guy did the data evaluators course, but he was thinking along those lines, because it was an out point for that color to be off, and he spotted it, and it took a couple of seconds in Photoshop, and he color corrected it for what it was supposed to be. Boom. And that's all there is to it. That's what the data evaluators course does, is it's just a little left of center, a little bit right to center, and then all of a sudden, the truth shall set you free. It's like, open your eyes, sort of a thing. So this is what can be done, and what's right there. The truth is right in front of us, and LRH has given us the keys to the campus. All we have to do is just understand that data and metabolize it and use it with whatever you want to use it with, and put sanity and order into the whole thing so that people can be happy, get along, and live peacefully. That's the whole end result of the whole thing. It isn't to make people wrong. It's to create a saner planet and for us to work together and be happy. That's the end result. It's
like the red pill on the Matrix. But that's really interesting, because I've heard this sort of stuff about Mars where you can actually breathe there for an hour without having to wear a mask. It seems like a really messed up version of Earth, like if Earth got blown up in a massive nuclear war.
Yeah, well, it was a war zone. I mean, the area beyond the asteroid belt was a destroyed planet. There was a little dust up that occurred that created that asteroid belt, and the big canyon that you have on Mars that's thousands of miles long, that's from that period. So this was a very active system at one point in time, and then became a desert after this war. And there's a long history to this solar system, and being an extremity out on a limb. Well, it's kind of like a backwater system, similar to the Tatooine system in Star Wars. Not many people get there, and that sort of a thing. And people do things here that they wouldn't be able to get away with if they were in closer to the center of the galaxy, because it's much more highly populated in that area. So, we're a backwater system on a backwater limb, and some crazy things have gone down, and it's a great place to put a prison planet. So that's what it all comes down to.
With some of these structures that are on Mars, it's very interesting how they're similar to the Egyptian pyramids. How old do you think the Egyptian pyramids are, and how old do you think the stuff that's on Mars is?
Well, I can tell you this much, that every planet on the system that isn't a gaseous ball has the same 3 pyramids on it in the same location on every one of them, as far as latitude and longitude. That's the stable data.
Now, hold on a second. So you're talking about like Saturn, or?
Well, however many planets you have that are actually solid planets. Some of them may even be covered over with one form of chemical ice, maybe not water ice, but chemical ice by now. But at one point, they were built in order to be used as a comparable magnitude to be able to plot anywhere on the planet with those 3 points. That was the idea.
So So there's a bunch of planets in our system that have the same 3 pyramids.
Yeah, Mars has 3 pyramids in the same place that Earth does.
And do you think they were built at the same time?
I do. I mean, what this was this civilization was looking at it from a viewpoint of if you will, a poor man's GPS, from a starship point of view, where you can say, okay, this is the point of reference. So you've got these 3 points, and with these 3 points, you can figure any point out down to the microsecond, if you will, as far as distance, so that you can plot anything out from those 3 points. That's the triangulation right there. When you have the triangle, you can figure the rest out. So that was the whole idea. This was a sort of like a mapping junket at one point in time, where these things were put together, and then the Egyptians came along and said, "Holy cow, these look great!
Yeah,
we got to do something with this."
Well, I reckon this was all about 15,000 years ago. What do you think?
It's hard to say. I've never sat down and done it on a meter, but they're much older than anybody in Egypt or the historians.
Now, hold on. If you were to use a meter to do that, you'll be doing it in a similar way that a dowsing person does.
Yeah, it's a similar concept.
So, and if you look at the pyramids on Mars, they look like they're more covered up and stuff, like they're more damaged, which would make sense because Mars seems to have been through a lot of crap.
Yeah, man, they're in much rougher shape now. At one point in time, the pyramids in Egypt, they all had gold tops. I mean, tens of feet in length downwards from the actual pinnacle of the pyramid down, so that they would shine in the sun and they could be seen easily from space on a sunny day. And it's no accident that they were put there in a place that doesn't see a lot of rain. They were put there because it doesn't see a lot of rain.
But what about that fact where they were saying there used to be trees all in that area of Egypt, and
oh, there were a lot of trees, but it wasn't like the middle latitudes where you have almost months of cloudy days.
Cloudy days, yeah.
You know, so it was an area. Well, there were trees. I mean, the Sahara. Let's see, 2,500 years ago, maybe 3,000 at the most, didn't exist. The Sahara Desert was created by deforestation created by the Romans.
Wow, that's a big.
It didn't used to be there that recently. All of the northern deserts along the Mediterranean, all of that area, Algeria, Libya, and all of that, used to be one big jungle. And that was all deforested by the Roman Empire and its affiliates.
And so getting rid of the trees somehow makes the rain stop.
Yeah, it makes the rain stop because you have to have this oxygen created. You have to have this high humidity created by the trees and all of the plant matter that sits on the ground, holds that water in, and then it evaporates, goes into the atmosphere, and then goes into the hydrologic cycle and brings it up and down, up and down, and up and down. And if you don't have that plant life, that's it. Party's over. So it's difficult to jumpstart once you've torn it down. And they're doing the same thing in the Amazon. Before too long, probably within yours and my lifetime, we will start to see deserts in what used to be the Amazon.
Well, this might explain for how people who believe in global warming say that the deserts are expanding because we're doing deforestation.
Yeah, well, if for no other reason. I mean, and that doesn't get into all of the other issues as far as the volcanism underneath the ocean off the west coast of South America, where you have your El Nino and your El Nino seasons. I mean, they just became aware of this in the last 15, 20 years, and they're still trying to figure out what the effects of El Nino and El Nino were, because all this is a warming up of the area off the west coast off of that large bulbous western shore of South America, and that's an area with a lot of underground volcanism that's going on that heats that water up and throws more water into the atmosphere some years, and then it decreases when there isn't as much heat going on. Now, and that's part of the Ring of Fire.
How many interesting how many years does the cycles go for? Is it like 8 years or something?
Well, the thing is that they're not really seeing what you would call a predictable cycle at the moment on it. They think it's somewhere in that neighborhood, but just when they think that they've got a pattern, it zigs when they think it's going to zag. So they don't have any way to figure out whether it's going to be an El Nino or El Nino year until they actually see it occur, because they just don't have enough data to have a data set large enough to say, here's the pattern. Because as far as meteorological data goes, we've only got 127 years, something like that, of meteorological data, and even that first 25 to 40 year period is iffy because of the recordings that were made by these devices, the barometers and everything were pretty iffy back then. And now we have digital barometers that are exact down to, a split hair. So we don't have a lot of comparable magnitudes as far as the weather goes to say, well, what was the weather like 2,000 years ago in Cairo, Egypt? We have no idea. We're never going to have any idea unless we go ahead and let the lid off the fact that we have time travel capabilities and they have this data. And, that's a whole other podcast there. But, we just don't have enough data to compare to. 125 years isn't much at all when you're trying to figure out what a global weather cycle is like. We just don't have enough information.
Well, in Melbourne, I noticed that it was quite hot and dry for around 8 years, and that was when I got real worried about global warming, and that was when Al Gore's film came out and all that rubbish. But then suddenly it got the summers got cooler, and we ended up having a fair bit of rain, and now it looks like we're moving back into a dry period. And it seems like they're around about 8 years of period, so El Nino, or whatever.
It affects the whole planet. That sort of a thing. And the volcanoes that erupt, they affect the whole planet too. When Krakatoa erupted, people heard it on the other side of the planet. And it affected the planet for years because of all of the dust particles that were put into the atmosphere, and caused beautiful sunsets for a period of a whole person's life before it changed. And the whole idea is, and this goes right back to the data evaluators course again, is what are you comparing this to, macro or micro? Because you're looking at different periods of time. And if you asked a 12-year-old boy, are summers hot? He would say, well, yeah, they've been hot my whole life, so therefore, yeah, summers are hot. If you were to ask a 70-year-old man who had 70 or 75 years of summers that he compared to, let's knock it down by 7 or 8 till when he was a young boy and he could actually have a rational comparison. You said, well, are summers hot? He would say, well, some summers are hot. Some summers are hotter than others. Some summers are cooler. Some are drier. Some are wetter. And you say, well, is this everywhere that you were at? Well, yeah, I pretty much lived in Redmond, California my whole life, and this is how it was for me. So, you have that person's viewpoint of hot summers. Well, that's 70 years, 75 years, whatever. And when you compare that to 125 years or 1,000 years, well, now you're looking at a macro scale as opposed to a micro scale. So it's all relative to the data that you have to compare to on these things. And yeah, okay, so the polar caps are melting at a rapid rate. We know that much to be true. Does that mean that they've never done this before? Well, we can't really confirm or deny that, to be perfectly honest, because you're only looking at it from the viewpoint of a couple periods of people's lives where people were paying attention to this stuff. Before that, if you went back to the 1500s, nobody had an idea how big the polar ice caps were, and they didn't care. They just know it was freaking cold and they shouldn't go there.
John, you sound like somebody who does not trust authority figures, and I think that's very wrong of you, John.
Well, science on this planet serves as a best guess and a placeholder for people who need to have a stable datum, because if they didn't, they might just be scared shitless. That's what science is on this planet.
I think that, yeah, because I think the truth, I think if you really hit people with the truth, it would scare them too much, because things aren't as safe as what they like. I think they like to be in these little nice Hollywood movies or something.
Right. I mean, when you see these shows about, well, this is how the sun works, and at the center of the sun, blah 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 blah, and they go on and they tell you all this. But the fact of the matter is if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. That's what you're dealing with in Earth science today, for the most part. Not entirely, but for the most part, because they're just placeholders for facts that they don't know, and so hypothesis type viewpoints are turned into stable data, which is another viewpoint that has to be taken into consideration on the Data Evaluators course, and LRH talks about, is if you don't have all of the information, well, then you better make sure that the information you have is correct. And Earth science doesn't even come close to that in a lot of ways, and not just natural sciences, but others as well, where it's just the best guess scenario.
With the Data Evaluators course, if you're this sort of person, because some people are like this, I find it quite odd, but maybe I have, a lot of connection with my past life or something. But there are some people out there who tend to just trust what they're told. And so if they were starting to study the Data Evaluators course, they would be like, hold on a second, I'm supposed to think, like I'm supposed to investigate and find out the truth. I'm not supposed to just trust what that university person says.
Well, right, exactly. That's my point, is just because somebody said it, and LRH talks about this on the student hat too, just because somebody said it doesn't mean it's true. Did they have the authority to say?
But there are so many people out there who say, they don't even realize it, right? They'll say, well, science says this, and it's like, well, have you done that experiment? Like, how do you know that's true? It's no different to a priest saying when you die you go to heaven or something like that. Like, it doesn't to you. Like, I know you think that the university person is saying fact, but the university person could not be saying fact. You know what I mean? Like,
right. So it comes down to, do you believe what you're told, or do you go and find the answers for yourself? That's what we're dealing with, and to kind of fine tune this into what you see in the news media, or even with the subject of Scientology. Just because Leah Remini and Mike Rinder say something about Scientology doesn't mean it's true. They may have been in Scientology, they may have done things in Scientology, but that doesn't make them an actual, factual, viable source of information. Leah Remini says, hey, you know what? The e-meter is a lie detector. And that's just an out-and-outright falsehood. A falsehood. It is not a galvanometer. It isn't basing it off of the hand sweat in your hands. But this is what this gal thinks. She doesn't have a fucking clue about what she's talking about, because she's on the motivator side of things. She's looking for motivators on what people did to her and what people in Scientology did to other people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so wrong-headed. It's just so
well,
uncool.
I remember I heard
any other data.
I remember I heard her talking about some stuff about the OT levels, and I was just thinking, damn, you have not studied spirituality or all these other practices because there's so much talk about entities.
Right. I mean, this isn't new data. It's not new data, but the new data is how to handle them, and that you don't have to get into all this tea leaves and chicken bones bullshit that you see in these other, it's like we're in the Amazon jungle again, and the only way to handle things is with this good and bad juju stuff. You don't have to do that. There's an actual science for it, and anybody that's ever dealt with somebody who has an out list in life as an auditor and then handles that out list and sees the relief that the person has when the bypass charge has been indicated with someone, and that they can actually function again. And you deal with this with, up the upper OT levels and everything like that, and you see the fundamental changes that you can make not only in the theta universe, but in the physical universe for somebody that's being bothered by this stuff. There's nothing else like it on this planet. And these other religions got close, but they didn't get very close because they didn't have the confront to deal with it. And that's where you get movies like The Exorcist and things like that. That's as close as they got. The power of Christ compels you. That sort of thing. That's as close as they got. And then LRH came up with this technology, and David Mayo as well, to handle this stuff. I mean, there's just nothing like it, and we may never, ever see anything like it again. And the Data Evaluators course came from these discoveries that LRH was making. The Data Evaluators course came out shortly after OT3 was developed.
Wow. And also with the study tech as well, you come across this idea of how words can mean the same thing. So someone can say demons 2,000 years ago, and then today they can say entity. And they can be talking about the same thing.
Yeah, well, you have to clarify with the person that when I say apple, you think apple. And when you say apple, I think we're talking about apples. I mean, that's why all of this stuff is so far behind in so many areas as far as spirituality, if you want to call it religion, philosophical aspects and everything, is because of all of the misunderstood words, and that everybody comes up with a different description of the same damn thing. But they're never on the same page with each other because there are so many different definitions and so many degrees to the left, degrees to the right on this stuff that they never meet up.
Yeah,
we never get a forward advancement.
It's not like you look up a word and it's got one simple definition. It's like, no, it can be that and it can be that. And it's like, there's heaps to it. Like, I mean, there's all these human aliens that were involved with humanity thousands of years ago, and they get labeled as gods. You know what I mean? And then it causes all these confusions and stuff. But then when you look at it, you're like, oh, and that's why Ancient Aliens is so cool, because it's word clearing the word God and alien and angel and stuff, and it's like fixing up these concepts so people are like, oh, now I can get it. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, derivations are an incredibly powerful thing, and you can get a tremendous amount of case gain and conceptual understanding of just chasing down where these words derive from and what they originally meant. And they started out as white, and they ended up as paisley. I mean, that's how far it goes. I mean, it's ridiculous, because it's this MU phenomena where this thing spirals out of control, and LRH even does a diagram on it in the word clearing series. I mean, it just literally just goes off into a spin because people don't understand things, or they dub things in. The reactive mind takes over, which is made up of concepts and words itself. And so it just goes on and on. It's no wonder things are the way they are. And that pulling all of this down, like with method 1 word clearing, for example, you can have somebody that has a misunderstood word pencil, and then that leads down the track somewhere and ends up having to do with something in a starship faster than light method of propulsion, or bending space and time, that sort of a thing. It's very similar to, I don't know if you've ever heard of the TV show Connections, by a British guy by the name of James Burke. And he takes chicken poop and goes, okay, we go from chicken poop to the Hiroshima bomb. And how did we get from this to this? And usually it's a lot more twisted than that, but it's the same thing. There are all these different connections, these derivations that you pull down that gets from a pulley to the jet engine. How do you go from a pulley to the jet engine? And this guy does this derivation forward and back on how these things happen. The same thing happens with words, because the words are what cause these physical universe things to happen in the first place.
There's so many things I want to ask you. I want to hear your opinion on this, right? Can you, when you come up to someone, right, who is below tone 2, who seems to be entity possessed, can you perceive that? Because I feel like I can perceive it, and I feel like I can perceive the personality of these demons.
Well, you're dealing with a composite personality.
Yeah.
Okay? Everybody is a composite.
But like, I feel like I can actually pick up their personality. Like, they're these little they're definitely immature. They're like got this little smart ass brat kidness to them. Like, I don't know. Am I perceiving right or?
No, I mean but you know, the prevalent social tone level of the society that we live in, and I'm probably being generous, is 1-1. But it's a humorous harmonic of that, where, you know, well, I'm a smart ass and I'm proud of it. Gotcha. You know, that sort of a thing. I mean, you see that all over the place here in America, that people, there's a sec check question that LRH asked, and I forget what the confessional is, where he asked, do you pride yourself on your wickedness? This is a confessional question. This is where this whole thing comes from, is that people pride themselves on this wickedness that comes from their composite case.
That reminds me, they're smart ass little these little smart ass sort of, like, they've got a personality, and I believe I can perceive it. So anyway, so I'm just wondering, from your point of view, can you sort of tell if someone's in valence, basically, is what I'm sort of asking.
Oh, absolutely. Any OT, especially anybody that's trained or slightly trained and has done mood drills, knows their tone scale. You don't have to even be OT to do it. You don't even have to be a Scientologist to do it. Because I'm not qualifying everything through the lens of Scientology either when I say that for some of our listeners. But I am saying that it does help to know the tone scale. And, you can perceive these ridges. They're palpable. You can pick up what it is that you're getting into, not by the look on their face, but by the ridge that precedes them. I mean, when I finished OT7, I knew what type of person was going to pull up next on the lot when I was doing outdoor sales. 20 minutes, in some cases, before I could get that flavor, I knew what was going to happen, when they were coming. I can't explain to you why that was or how that was, but I just knew it. It was that fundamental. Would
it be like you would get the flavor of some mafia guy, the next minute, like, a mafia guy walks in or something?
Yeah. It would almost be like, for lack of a better expression, to just convey it. It would be sort of like smelling their cologne before they showed up. Or trying to think another sense that would, it'd be like sort of like if there was a certain pattern of wavelength to an electrical field that was different than what you would normally perceive with something. If you've ever been in an area where the lightning just was going to strike, you get this kind of, your hair stands up on your neck feeling and everything before it happens. That's when you jump down onto the ground. But it was that sort of a thing, and I got this wavelength, this vibe, before these people would show up, and now I just know. I know what I'm dealing with somebody before they ever say a word to me. Not that I'm being judgy; it's just a perception.
Now hold on. So
go ahead.
About the entity thing though, do you notice that they seem to have this similar personality?
Well, I wouldn't say that they have a similar personality per se, and I don't try to explain the lower bridge with the upper bridge. It's just the fact that it is. That's how it is, and the lower bridge solves itself out leading into the upper bridge. The entity stuff, okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's there. But you're not going to do anything about it for quite some time with somebody that's never done anything. You can't walk up to somebody and say, hey, did you know that you're a composite being and you've got entities all over you? I mean, that's all you're going to do is evaluate, and all you're going to get back is a bunch of bypass charge. So it doesn't solve the problem to know that, or for them to know that, or for you to know that. But it does solve the problem to know how to deal with what they're manifesting from what you're talking about.
Hold on a second. Can you say that again? Like, explain that further.
If you know how to handle somebody, okay, you could say, well, the house is on fire. All right, so you've got a couple of options. You can watch the house burn. You can sit there and you can contemplate, well, I wonder what caused the house to burn while the house is burning. Or you can put the fire out, and then you can go in and investigate when it's safe. And then find out whether the house was caused by an electrical issue, or if it was arson, or what the deal was. That's what I'm trying to say is, the house is on fire, okay? That's somebody with this type of attitude that we're talking about as an analog. So what do you do with a house that's on fire? Do you add more gasoline to the fire by indicating to them that they're possessed by entities? And no, you don't. You don't bring it up. You don't say anything about it. You just understand that this person is a composite case, and then you just handle them by matching their tone level and bringing it up a little bit and talking to them in a reality that they can understand. Now, maybe that it's kind of icky to deal with people that way sometimes, because it is for me, and I try to avoid it when I can, but sometimes you can't. And so you just address them that way, and you just use standard science and survival methods to deal with these people, because they're the majority of the society, unfortunately.
Would it be sort of correct to say that one of the personalities that might be common amongst entities is like a retarded, spoiled brat personality? Like sort of cartoon character, like that?
Let me put it to you this way. As far as the entities thing goes, it doesn't matter that they are. It doesn't matter that they cause, that they manifest a certain attitude, the one like you just mentioned, okay? That is the solution to a problem that a person is manifesting, that particular tone level. That's how they get through life. That's all you need to know. Seriously. That's the only thing you need to know when you see somebody acting, what was it, bratty, and what was the other part of it?
Well, it's like a retarded, cheeky, spoiled brat sort of thing.
Right. Well, see, that's what they use in order to survive. That's their solution to survival at this point, because they're protecting themselves by being cheeky. That's all you need to know. Entities don't have a thing to do with it.
Now, with me, I'm not up to doing the OT levels yet, but I don't like the idea of of being possessed or whatever. Is there anything I can do to try and make sure that I'm in control all the time?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, the only thing that you can do is, and I tell all of our public this, is, and I'll go into this further, I'm going to give you the end result, and then we can kind of wind it back. But to the degree that you don't want to go in session as a solo auditor is to the degree that you must go in session as a solo auditor.
Yeah, I know. I've noticed that with heaps of stuff I've done is that if I find I do something and it's hard or I just can't get into it, it's like, no, that's why you need to do it. Like, and this was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you about when you go to start a new like grade or action. If it's a big one, all these stops come into your universe. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, well, LRH talks about that on the Class 8 course, too, that where you see somebody dramatizing something and they're on a particular grade, well, you know that they're coming up to a point where they're dramatizing their next level. That's why the grades are in the order that they're in. And this also comes into play as far as training goes, too. And, you know, LRH says on the Class 8 course also that, you know, he always knew what a person didn't understand and what they didn't grasp by the questions that they asked. So, you know, in a way, it's a little bit of a cheeky thing to say it that way, but it's also very true that a person only asks questions about things that they don't understand or they don't completely get. So you know where you need to fill in the holes. And so if you looked at these particular personalities that you're talking about as far as them being cheeky and kind of smart ass and things like that, aren't they asking you a question in a certain way by their behavior? You know, that's really what's going on. And if you understand that, you know how to fill the hole. Because there's something they're looking for by manifesting that tone level, that behavior, those mannerisms in general.
What are they looking for?
Yeah, exactly. So you know exactly what course you need to put them on. You know exactly what action they need. Somebody says, well, I've got these horrible migraines. And you go, out it. Boom. Okay. Or they're constantly just totally bypass charged. They're just pissed off at everybody. They're yelling all the time. And rah, 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 rah. Well, chances are 9 times out of 10, they've got an out list. And, you know, and so if you understand these basics as a student, then you understand these basics as an auditor and you can do something about that person. That's what Scientology is about. And it used to drive my mom nuts, just nuts. She just hated the fact, and I love her dearly now that she's gone especially. But she used to just hate the fact that we had an answer for everything, and it just perplexed her. It pissed her off to no end that Scientology had an answer for everything. Why can't just things be unknown? And I, you know, I always laughed, and I didn't want to be mean or anything like that, but it just used to vex her so and task her that we had an answer for everything. And why did we have to have an answer for everything? And I thought, that is really, really interesting that you say that, Mother. And that just used to piss her off even more. So, you know, I mean, all cases are solvable, and there's only so many angles that these people come from. The tone level, the social tone level, is the index to the book that says they behave this way, they need this. And LRH has a whole set of CSs on the Class 8 course that says, if this is going on, this is what you do. If this is going on, this is what you do. These are the steps you take to handle this. This is how far he had come, how many cases he had seen, that he could say to these 33 auditors on the Class 8 course, look, this happens, this is what you do. It doesn't deviate any from this. There was a solution to, and there is a solution to everything. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and say all entities are your friends and blah, 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 and all this jazz, all these crazy-ass viewpoints that people get in order to solve something, because anybody that has to change anything from the workability of Scientology and how high it is doesn't understand the subject very well, and you need to steer clear of those types of people because they're looking for a new way to invent the wheel because they couldn't understand the wheel in the first place.
Yeah. I remember when some Scientologists would say something about like the jokers and degraders thing. How if someone was being funny or something like that, they would say jokers and degraders, and that's like a kind of answer, like there's always an answer for everything, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I remember I kind of didn't like it. But then I observed a twin who was just clearly exactly what this policy letter was written for, because it was like using comedy in this smart-ass one-one-y sort of way, and it wasn't an upturn comedy. And I kind of thought, like, people apply that jokers and degraders thing too much, or they're too fast to apply it. Anyway, then I got involved with like stand-up comedians in Melbourne, and I was just like, Jesus Christ. Like, so many of them were one-ones. Like, so many. The percentage would probably be like 60 or 70%, which is freaking massive. You know what I mean? Like, compared to let's say, people at the local baseball club or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, the ratio is just insane. Like, 60, 70% one-ones. And I was just like, I think some people might be too quick to apply that jokers and degraders thing, but LRH is right. I mean, yeah, like, just so many of them are freaking smart-ass one-ones.
Yeah, well, on the data evaluators course, in the data series, LRH actually defines what humor is. It is a pointing out of outpoints, period. And you'll find that the most successful comedians on the planet in history, which would be, well, you know, I mean, we can't go as far back as the guys that were entertaining the kings and stuff like that in castles back in the 1400s, 1300s, 1500s, that type of the thing. But we can, in modern day society, say that the most successful comedians were the comedians were literally auditing the audience with their comedy, because what they're doing is they're pointing out these outpoints to people. And when they point these outpoints to people, these people line charge. They laugh.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're laughing is because the comedian has just indicated the correct bypass charge on an outpoint. That's the comedian's job.
That's a good, I agree with that. Reminds me a little bit of maybe what Jerry Seinfeld does.
Yeah, you know, have you ever noticed when? You know, that sort of a thing. And
he goes, what's the deal? He goes, what's the deal with airplane peanuts?
Right. That's what he does. And if you ever watch, I think probably one of the most cathartic shows that we've ever watched, my wife and I, is Comedians in Cars Drinking Coffee, which is Jerry's new show that started out a couple of years ago on one of the lesser video channels and then was picked up by Netflix last year.
Is it still running?
Yeah, it's still running.
Oh, wow.
And he goes out with all of these popular comedians, and they, you know, get in a classic car and they go for a ride. And they have some breakfast, have some coffee, and they talk shop. And it's really interesting to see how different comedians who have different tone levels that come from different social backgrounds, how they have a sort of a myopic view which works for them in their particular area, whether it's Sarah Silverman or it's Chris Rock, or, I mean, you know, there's tons of them. Mel Brooks he had on there. I mean, you know, and you look at it and you see how these guys look at things and how they look at outpoints and how they've crafted these things, and they look at it from the viewpoint of when you bomb and you don't do a good show and what happens to how you handle a heckler. You know, there's all these other idiosyncrasies that go along with it, but it's a fine art. It's a mathematical science on how to craft a joke. They're basically saying, how do you audit a third dynamic to make them laugh, to line charge on something, to point out a truth? And that's when you're successful, is when they get the joke and they've got it down to the millisecond, when they process what it was that they said, how they said it, what the delivery was to indicate that bypass charge to make people laugh. They are auditing, period. And that's the wonderful thing about it, is such a glorious activity, and why it possesses them so. If you don't get into the side of they want to create an effect and they want to be interesting instead of interested. But if the best comedians are just as interesting as they are interested, because they can't be interesting without being interested in the human condition first. That's one of the things that I noticed.
Can I quickly ask you something? Is the Wall of Fire and the Ring of Fire referencing the same thing?
I'm not familiar with anything as far as LRH's stuff. In the Ring of Fire, the Wall of Fire is the OT3 materials. There's also reference to a second Wall of Fire in the upper levels. But, that's just a way, it's a symbological way to convey something about a particular area, because everything is a symbol. And you have to get it across.
What I'm trying to say is that, if you travel the world, will some people say, "Oh, that's the Ring of Fire," and Joe Blow in Argentina will go, "That's the Wall of Fire." The same thing.
How much of that is just a misduplication of what somebody's talking about? The Ring of Fire, by definition, is the large tectonic plate that makes up the Pacific Basin. And that goes from Japan all the way down to New Zealand, all the way down to north of Antarctica, and it curves back up right off of the coast of South America.
Yeah, and
it comes up Central America to the Pacific Northwest and up into Alaska.
And did LRH say Wall of Fire instead of Ring of Fire? And he's referring to the same thing.
Well, I can't say. I don't know why he used Wall of Fire in particular. I'm sure somebody else out there that was around at the time. I was in diapers or waiting to be in diapers when he was developing OT3 last time around. So I wasn't around in that period. I was around in the period of the development of OT2. So I couldn't really say, and it would just be conjecture on my part to suppose why he picked that, other than the subject matter having to do with why he put a volcano on the cover of Dianetics. And I don't even know when that started. Probably around the time that OT3 came around, because all of those covers on the original books, as far as the dust jackets, were used to re-stimulate people to get them to buy the book. That was LRH's intent. And the volcano on Dianetics is no accident. He did that on purpose.
Okay, I think you've answered my question, which is good, because when I heard Wall of Fire, I thought that might be some incident like past life on Mars or something, and it involves actually walking through a wall of fire. And I thought maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the Ring of Fire, but now you're confirming what I actually thought was that no, this is just Ring of Fire, Wall of Fire. It's just referencing this area of Earth.
Yeah, it's just referencing a particular incidents that occurred, and that's the long and the short of it. That's my take on it, at least.
Hey, but earlier you were talking about you mentioned how we're moving into another part of the universe. Now, does that mean you subscribe to the photon belt awakening theory?
I don't know that I would say that I subscribe to the awakening part of it. I think that might be a little airy-fairy to that degree, knowing what I know about beings and that they're not of the physical universe. I would say that it has to do a lot with the messed universe and the changes that can occur in it that people identify themselves with erroneously. I will say that. But I don't agree and don't subscribe to the spiritual awakening, because we're going through a higher particle, more charged particle rate, and that affects people. If that's the case, I'm very disappointed, because we've been in this band now for 6-7 years. So I don't think that has anything to do with it. But again, that's just my opinion.
Well, maybe it's takes time.
Right. Well, it's all everything is relative. You know, when Einstein came up with the theory of relativity and everything, which LRH disagrees with, by the way. But
sorry, what'd you say?
That LRH doesn't agree with E equals MC squared.
Oh my God! Yeah, sorry, synchronicity, big time. I was literally just about to ask you about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, as far as relativity goes, that is a particular datum that I use more times a day than I'm trying to think of something that I would use more that didn't have to do with the bodily function. I think about that. It's all relative. Well, relative to what? Okay, what comparable magnitudes do I have? And, you know, time is, and this gets into the E equals MC squared and all this stuff as far as these things are relative to what? What are they relative to? And that's what Scientology is all about. That's what auditing is all about. That's what training is all about, is that you have to provide enough stable data for a person to have a platform to stand on, to then be able to say, okay, I have these stable data. Now, does that mean that there aren't other better stable data or there are less stable data? Sure, there are. Scientology doesn't have all the answers, but it's a damn good fucking start.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got to take that viewpoint and you can't just be myopic about it and go, well, okay, this is it. This is all there is. Scientology is it. I can't. No. Scientology is a jumping off point from the viewpoint of you can't be just totally stuck in the viewpoint of, all right, these are my comparable magnitudes. This is what everything's relative to. I used to do that. I don't do that anymore because you have to understand that there are other things and that Scientology was the beginning of something else. Now, I'm not saying go off and do something else. I am saying that if you have enough stable data, of which there is a plethora of in Scientology, once you have enough of that information, and that may be different, plus or minus for different individuals, then you can start to perceive and conceive of things that LRH either didn't have the time to, or maybe he didn't think to bring up, or he didn't notice or whatever. But that's what doing Scientology does, is it gets you to the point to where you're climbing up this mountain, and then all of a sudden you get on the top of the mountain and you stand out on the edge of the cliff and you go, holy cow, there's all this other stuff. But now I have comparable datums from everything I learned in Scientology, and all of this negative case is gone, to where I can now actually look at this stuff as it is. And I can look at it without being biased and within a relativity that is clean and much purer than I would have been without the OT levels, without the training. And it is. The whole thing, Scientology is one big circle. It really is. Because you start out at that circle and you come around and you're at the 3 o'clock position, and then you're at the 6 o'clock position, and then you're at the 9 o'clock position. And you're on the OT levels and everything. And once you get through about OT 5 to OT 7, and, you know, depending upon what flavors of the bridge you want to do after you finish OT 7, which I highly recommend, and don't deviate from LRH's bridge before you do anything else. Once you run out of LRH's bridge, all right, all bets are off. You do whatever you want because you don't have anything else. LRH knew what he was doing. Follow it. Period. If you don't, you're on your own.
Yeah, I noticed it just massively opens up doors, massively. And and when it comes to those other practices, yeah, you can get wins from them, but it's just like you want to do Scientology first, because I just don't think I would have gotten into those other practices if I hadn't done Scientology beforehand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's like I say, and this was what brings me back around full circle, is it's all relative to what you know. You know, you're a vessel. You get filled up with data that you can compare, and you can look at these cat's eye marbles, and you can say these are prettier than these, and these have different qualities, and then you know all of the different types, because the physical universe is a limited thing. There's only so many things that can occur in the physical universe. The rest of the things that can occur are a blending of the theta universe and other universes with the physical universe. But the physical universe is pretty darn finite. And there is a codex to the physical universe. And at some point, somebody will either basically remember it, or will run across it or whatever, and will understand how the physical universe works as to, how many types of different periods of life forms there are. It's all a set-up thing. There are boundaries to the physical universe. Other universes, not so much. The theta universe, even not so much, even greater so. But the thing is, Scientology gives you that platform for these other discoveries that you can find yourself and find your own path to have these comparable magnitudes of which you cannot even remotely conceive of right now. That's why Scientology is so good.
Now, with the Einstein stuff, what was LH saying about it?
Well, he was just saying that Einstein was off. He was on a briefing course lecture. He was saying that he was incorrect because he was basing it off of only physical universe concepts. So, it's one of those things that I can either confirm or deny, because the whole idea of what Einstein's formula has to do with is the speed of light, and it being a constant, and the state of change depending upon what your relative viewpoint is. Now, the thing is that the speed of light is, it's constant, that's for sure, but there are things that are faster than the speed of light. Gravity is faster than light.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that these societies, some of the societies that we've dealt with that have come here and everything like that, have told people is that this is one of the ways that you get around is you use gravity as a focal point, and you amplify that focal point, and it's sort of like rolling a ball downhill because you're focusing on that gravity well, and that's how you get there. Now, I can't explain any more than that, but it rings true, and that light is what causes gravity. A star's light is what causes gravity. It's not the mass of any given object, which is one of Einstein's theories, is that it's the mass of an object that creates gravity. Well, they're starting to find out that is not the case when they're looking into these supermassive black holes. Because if that's the case, how is it that a black hole can suck in anything without having mass? Because it's completely contrary to the idea that the greater the mass, the greater the gravity.
Yeah. So,
again, that brings us back to the concept of Earth science is a placeholder until the facts actually come in. So we live in the dark ages.
Yeah, because I've been looking into Einstein a lot recently, and I mean, today and back in his day, it's not like the science community all agreed with him. Like, there wasn't, mass agreement on Einstein, and it's like because of his messy hair and maybe because he did come up with some things that were right. He became a bit of a pop culture like icon, and he just got put up a bit too much in the academic field, like Einstein, and that's why when I heard LIH say some stuff like Einstein, why do they go, oh, Einstein? I mean, I agreed, I felt the same, and it's funny because when I heard that, this was years ago before I even really looked into anything about Einstein, but I just could resonate with what LIH was saying.
Yeah, well, LRH is just trying to convey that, don't be too quick to judge on anybody's formulas, because there's a lot more going on in the universe than people realize, and some of it is incredibly fantastic in comparison to what we see here in our little corner of the universe. So there's a lot more to be had, but it is finite. There's no doubt about that. But when you start adding in a different universe and how one universe interacts with another universe, that's when the real exciting, magical type things happen. But you have to know how to get there. These things where you can, you lose something and it falls right off the side of your bed and disappears and you never see it again. I mean, these are all things that happen to people on any given day. We've talked about this in some of the other podcasts.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Well, you know, like when people have fallen off of buildings and never hit the pavement, never to be seen again. You know, that sort of thing, you know, or generally it has to do with the correct velocity and drop well type technology, stuff that they've had in science fiction and whatnot. My dad even wrote a book on it. So there's a lot of interesting things that can happen that combine universes that make the physical universe a lot more dynamic than it really is, because it's a blurring of the lines of one universe to the other. It isn't part of one universe. It's actually part of two or more universes colliding or being in the right place at the right time, that sort of a thing.
Sounds like a lot of the Mandela effect stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, then you get into time and all that stuff, too, and that's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah, so. Very interesting. John Lear called Einstein a dumbass, and he's got a funny way of talking about him, but I don't think he. I wouldn't call him a dumbass, but yeah, I just don't think he was as smart as what they're making him out to be, and it makes sense that, of course, whoever's adopted by the mainstream is the person who's wrong. Like the same with the mind and Freud. I mean, some of Freud's stuff is just really silly, like the whole sex thing and little kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just,
well,
silly.
If you know the mainstream picks that team, then go with another.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much always the case.
Any good data on time travel?
No, still working on that. I mean, you know, you run into a lot of things where the lines get blurred on what we would call time in the physical universe, as far as when you get up to the upper levels, on the OT levels and things like that. You find, and I tell all of my pre-OTs this, and I had them on it, that as you go up the bridge, you will find that you supersede, there is a parity where you're in line with the physical universe and things that happen in the physical universe. And then as you, well, actually, I mean, it actually starts behind that where they're not at parity. You make a postulate and it takes 6 months or a year or 10 years or whatever for that postulate to come to fruition. And then you get to parity, and the ability to get that postulate to manifest is much better. And then you can postulate once you go out of parity in front of the physical universe to where you postulate stuff and you scare yourself because it happens right then and there. And then you get into perception, which is ahead of postulation. And you start perceiving things before they happen. There was a period where I was, where was I at? I was on Excalibur after I finished OT7, which is the only time I recommend to do Excalibur, by the way, but that's a whole other conversation. When I was on Excalibur, I found that I would get sick a couple of days before there was some, what some would call traumatic, or there was some big row that was going to happen, and I never knew why, and I would get physically ill, and then it would catch up, and then I would have this realization that I was perceiving this thing 3 days out before it happened, but I didn't get an email, if you will, stating that this was going to happen. And once I got through the level, it cessated, and it didn't happen anymore. And then I just knew that something was going to happen before it happened, 3 or 4 days out. And I really have to keep things in balance on that as far as time goes, and really kind of open up to use an empath's lingo to open up and actually perceive what it is that's going to happen before it happens. Because what you're doing as an OT is you're perceiving things before the physical universe combines them together. Does that make sense? So you're ahead of time.
Yeah.
As an OT.
I mentioned this earlier, but like when I would go to do an action and it was like an important one, I would have stops come in my universe, and I'd just have to work through the stops, and then I'll get started on it. But it would just I couldn't just start something straight away. Like the stops would come in and stuff. Have you noticed this happen? And what do? Do you just have to put up with whatever stupid stops come in the way and handling them so you can get onto it?
Well, I wish I could say that I had a solution to that all the time. If that was the case, we would have had this podcast 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of being self-deprecating in saying that because I don't have the answer of all answers to give you on that. But I do know that for anything to persist, there's a lie behind it, which is what LRH says. And that a lot of the stops that you see on the lower end of the bridge, they tend to end off as you go up the early OT levels, especially up after OT3, because you're dealing with a lot of counter-postulate influence at that point in time. And then it gets to be where you have to be responsible with what you put out there. So it goes from another source creating counter postulates. So you got the goals, problems, mass thing, the ridges, that sort of the thing that the OT case, you're running up against. You say red, it says black. And then once you get through OT3, now you say red, but you have to be careful that you don't invalidate, evaluate, or put some other spin on it to stop something from happening, because instead of the counter postulation of the composite case, you only have the counter postulation of your own decisions. So you have to be responsible with your own postulation machine, if you will, or your own decision machine, whatever you want to call it, because that's the only thing that's really going to stop you. And you start running up against what LRH talks about in the axioms, where a thing's got to have a game, and a game consists of unknowingness. Because there's no game if you know how to beat the game that you are playing. So you need to be able to tightrope walk that balance of being able to play a game and not know everything at the same time, because otherwise you get bored with it. I mean, I've had several issues in my life recently where I'm just kind of bored with things because I've done the things that I want to do. I've achieved the things that I want to achieve, and I'm looking for a new game. So that's when a thing has to go into a new area and learn it. And that's where the game, the chase begins. It's not acquiring the Messed Universe object. It's not acquiring the brass ring at the end of the game. It's the journey of the whole thing. And that's what a game consists of. That's actually the biggest part of the game, is the journey of the game. It's not winning the game. The winning of the game is extremely brief and sometimes dissatisfying.
It is,
because you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing, is you have to be careful as an OT to be able to play games where you don't know everything, and you have to push into new areas that maybe it's like a scratch-off ticket, if you will. You can only see one number, and then you scratch off a little bit more and scratch off a little bit more as you go. That's making and playing the game. So I would say that being in control of your own aberration as an OT is the biggest game there is of all, because you can't know everything and have a game. So you kind of have to scratch off a little bit at a time and try new areas. And the older you get, the more creative you get. You kind of get into that second childhood thing where you're tired of dealing with all of the bullshit of the physical universe, and all you want to do is do aesthetics. You see that a lot in people. So, that to me, it seems a little counterintuitive, where you're kind of imbuing yourself back into the physical universe. But again, that's just my viewpoint. So I hope I've answered your question.
I'm probably going to have to listen to this. With the stops thing, it's like I'm booby-trapped. like my own mind is booby-trapped and it doesn't want me to, like I remember when I was starting objective auditing, it was like my mind was booby-trapped and it was like trying to stop me from getting in there and starting it.
Well, that's what you're running into is on the lower part of the bridge, if you had a bunch of marbles and you just threw them out on the table, they're random and they're chaotic and they're just, you know, an unknown distance apart away from each other, and there's no real pattern of logic to it. And what you're doing on the lower end of the bridge is you're taking those marbles and you're putting them in a line, or you're putting them in several lines, so that there's some uniformity to it, and that there's a logic to it that really straightens out the case. And basically what the lower end of the bridge is, each grade is putting in a rudiment. And that's how the lower bridge is set up, is that you're putting in these rudiments, then you make the guy clear, and then, okay, now the guy no longer has his own reactive mind. Okay, boom. Now you got that. Okay, now you're going to put the rudiments in on the larger scale with the composite case, and you're going to instead of using a tablespoon to move this case, now you're going to bring in a backhoe, and you're going to pull all of this crap out of the composite case and all of this bank agreement and all of these R6 banks that go along with it, and you're going to get rid of that. And now the guy can actually see things as they are, and he actually cares about himself and other people, instead of having all of the stuff that was in his case, and all of his rudiments are in on two different levels, both personally and on the third dynamic. And now he wants to do something for the third dynamic and the fourth dynamic. Now, unfortunately, with the church, the way they went about it is they started spinning the whole thing to where it became about the physical universe and not about the third dynamic, and he who has the most toys wins, that sort of a thing. And that's what they were trying to do, was spin these OTs in, because the last thing the powers that be on this planet that run it are having a bunch of OTs running around doing good things. So that's the thing that you're running into at the bottom end of the bridge, is that you have to push through this and get through it. Run, don't walk up the bridge, because you're running out of time. And just look at it from that viewpoint and realize that you needed to be OT yesterday, because that's the only way you're going to get through this stop stuff that's coming up in the case, because it's going to push back, and you have to push back twice as hard and realize that, and admire it. Just admire it. That's the best thing that you can do, because the two greatest things you're going to run into, the most valuable particles in the physical universe from the theta universe, are attention and admiration. Attention foremost, and then admiration. A lot of the stuff you read says admiration is the most valuable particle. It is the most valuable particle, but you have to get rid of the need for attention first, and that comes from the composite case, and that's what you're putting the rudiments in on, is this need for attention. And once you free that unnecessary need for attention, then admiration comes into play and all the stops disappear.
All right. I had something to say, but I forgot.
Sorry.
Okay, this is interesting. Sometimes I doodle like sort of crosses with circles coming out of the center of them, and then little squiggly lines. Similar things like that sometimes. And I never thought anything of it until I heard something about, or watched some things about people being abducted by aliens. And after they had that experience, it's blocked from their memory, but they would sometimes doodle things or accidentally write mathematical equations like amazing things or something like that. And then I thought, maybe this little doodle that I sometimes do is something that's actually in my subconscious, in my reactive mind. And it's like some sort of incident. Like it's maybe maybe it means something, because it looks like it could be some sort of theta trap or something, like a cross and then you add another cross over it, and then you do circles coming out of it, and then that could be like some sort of wavelength, or do you think anything of that?
Well, I would say this. I wouldn't read a whole hell of a lot into it. I would just acknowledge it, that there is some significance to it, and just leave it at that, because otherwise you run into the Close Encounters of the Third Kind syndrome, where you just get fixed attention on it and all of that, and that's the last thing you want to have happen. Just acknowledge it for what it is and go, yeah, there's something to this. I don't know if you remember Richard Dreyfuss saying that in Close Encounters, but he's sitting there making this devil's tower out of mashed potatoes and clay, and there's something to this. Don't read anything into it other than that there's some degree of importance to it. Just acknowledge it and move on. Otherwise, it's unhealthy and it's aberrant.
Yeah, I'll find out one day. I mean, it could be something where it's like actually describing how an atom works or something. It's some secret to the universe. Yeah. And like it could be some amazing scientific symbol or something that I remember from a previous life, and it's like, yeah, I've carried it with me because it's like real important, because it's like it can get you out of the matrix or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you will find out, and what you may find out is that it just as is, and that's it. And there's no big finish or anything like that. Or it may come completely clear and be a huge cognition. But until that time, the joy of the whole thing is the journey. So I would get stuck on it. In other words.
Yeah. Earlier when I mentioned how LRH might have missed out on or not put enough information into the lack of mass idea, because I feel like it could be another barrier, lack of life experience. Because I feel like mass is a little bit different to, like, I associated it with mass because I'm like, I feel like on this subject, like, it won't be talking about a tractor, for example, but it'll be something where it's like, I don't have life experience on that, and I'll be studying it, and I'll be like, you need life experience to properly understand this. And so it's kind of like you got a lack of mass. But, I mean, well, I don't know, do you sort of agree with me that LRH didn't put enough info in that and should have put another barrier in or something?
Well, I don't know that he should have put another barrier in, but I think that there could have been a cut gradient to that sort of thing, where if somebody doesn't know anything about anything, then they have to be R-factored, that there are going to be things that you run into in life that you don't know the first damn thing about. If somebody told me, well, we're going to be studying pancreases today. Well, I've heard of a pancreas and I kind of know what it does, but, and I know it's kind of a squiggly thing and that you have to have one and that it's important to, digesting sugars and stuff like that. But, beyond that, I don't know anything about it. So I kind of feel that way about pancreases. So I need to get a better understanding of it. But in this day and age, compared to when LRH actually wrote these particular datums on study, I mean, as far as the availability that we have for information, I mean, you have access to just about anything at the speed of light anymore. So if you don't understand, if you've never heard of something, look it up. Watch a video.
Yeah.
That sort of a thing. I mean, it is a lack of mass, but what is underneath a lack of mass is a quality of or state of significance. And this comes up in the axioms, which you'll be covering in your course here real soon, is, that there are these basics, and you have to understand that without a significance of something, and somebody says, well, I mean, when we were kids and somebody said chlorophyll, I never really knew what chlorophyll looked like. I was just told that that's what made plants green, and it wasn't until later on that I understood that, oh, well, there's a cell and this is what it does and this is what it looks like. But we didn't have access to that stuff. It was in a paper book, those things that you don't see as much anymore. And there was, maybe a picture or two or anything like that. then you type in chlorophyll on Google or any other search engine, and you can say image chlorophyll image, or just go to images when you type the word in the search field, and you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images of this particular thing. Well, there you go. Now you've got some significance along with that mass. So, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So you've got a concept that's assigned a word to mean that concept. So I think that that's kind of what you're running into on this sort of a thing is if you've never run across it before, what the hell am I talking about here as far as what I'm studying? So, but it's a lot easier than it was 60 years ago or 70 years ago now when this stuff first came out, because all they had was maybe 12, 14 different volumes of encyclopedias. Even when I was in elementary school, we had one set of encyclopedias, and they weren't Britannica encyclopedias, which were pretty much the gold standard for data, because that was where you went to look something up. There was no such thing as Google. There was no internet as we knew it. You only had a few sources, and then if you went to a library, most libraries were behind as far as the sources of information that they had, in some cases by 30 years, because libraries were so poorly underfunded. And the only person that put libraries there was Dale Carnegie. He developed at least here in the U.S., he's the one that developed all of the libraries in the United States. I can only imagine what things were like before we even had public libraries, because public libraries didn't exist. Most city governments didn't have them, and Carnegie was this rich multi-millionaire who funded these libraries. There was no place to look. If you had 2 or 3 books in any given household, that was almost uncommon. If you had a McGuffey's Reader and then you had a primer for school, you were lucky. Most of those stayed in the schoolroom. So, if we think it's bad now, imagine what it was like 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago when they didn't even have encyclopedias, or they didn't have pictures. So we've got it good. It's just a matter of the moment you think you don't know something, stop what you're doing in your study, look it up. And I don't mean with dinky little definitions. Spend some time on it. Go to Wikipedia. Remember that if you read something on Wikipedia or you read it on the internet, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And look for several sources and verify these things and cross-reference it. Take that time, because to the degree that you understand the data and you know that data is to the degree that you can actually apply it and do something for somebody else with it in a positive sense.
And I've got a good example of it. Like, let's say you're reading, let's say you're involved with the church and reading the basics, you're studying it, and you come across something where it talks about how you can move an object with your mind, that sort of idea. Now, if you've got some girl who went to school in a country town and at 18 years old came and did the Pure Earth and just has no life experience on moving objects with her mind, she'll read that and go, okay, and then keep on reading. And the thing with me is that if I read that, I would go, I could really follow along with what L. Ron Hubbard is saying and have life experience going with it, like a lot of mass with what he's talking about. And I'll be like, whoa. The same is if he starts talking about politics and maybe stuff to do with lawyers or something like that. I can go, whoa, and then I can finish the basics and go, whoa. And I'll take longer because I'll be thinking a lot with it, and I'll be like, whoa. Whereas someone else can just go along and study it, and they do understand the sentence they read, but they don't understand it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's I just noticed it when there was someone who, I noticed in the church, it was this whole thing about, this rush idea, and so people would rush through things, and they'll be like, I did all the basics, and you just be like, you don't look like a genius to me. And it's like, well, yeah, because they're sort of going through it too fast, and also because they're just reading things, and how are they to know whether or not it's true you can move an object with their mind? And so I would hit that. I'll study LRH, and I'll be like, well, I don't know if I can trust that. You know what I mean? And it's just an inbuilt thing that I have in myself. And
Right.
I'll want mass on it. I want evidence. I want life experience on what you're talking about. And other people just gobble it up. But then at the end of the day, they don't become wise after studying it because they're not getting as much out of it. So I don't know. I just feel like in study tech, there's almost there needs to be something about this experience thing. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is, from one lifetime to the next. You either win the lottery or you lose the race, because you, depending upon the composite case that you have, is variable from one lifetime to the next. You might win the lottery one time and you might lose it the next. So you have to be understanding of that in what you see as far as other people that you deal with and the cards that they've been dealt, and that they're not necessarily dealt as good of a hand as you are, and there are others who are dealt a better hand than you are. Now,
Yeah,
that's
but
not
I
to
don't
say that you can't change that.
Yeah, but I think that they don't want to look further for like the thing is that LRH's stuff is so deep. I can understand how someone could read it, start reading the basics as like a 22-year-old. They could go into church, start studying the basics, and I mean they just don't know about Jefferson in 1822 or something like that, and all this back stuff. He's such a wise man, and it's just like all this, and it's the same when sometimes you can listen to someone like John Lear or something, there's all this back stuff going on, and then if you just don't know about anything, it can just all go over your head.
Right. Well, if you looked at, I'm trying to think of a good way to analogize it. Every person is dealt like a certain amount of attention units or abilities, sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons character, where they have so many this constitution and so much strength, and they have so much of this and so much of that. They might have 10 of this, 6 of this, 4 of this, 9 of this, that sort of a thing, or a +1 above 10, or that sort of a thing. Everybody has different capabilities and lack thereof from one lifetime to the next, and the best thing that you can do is get as much as you can out of the way and clear all of that stuff out. So you've got 8s across the board, or 9s, or whatever, or 10 plus 3, sort of a thing. And that's what you're running into with people. And all of this stuff is simplified by the chart of human evaluation, because depending on where a person is at on the tone scale is depending upon not only where they take communication from what's said to them, but they take communication from what's read to them when they read something, and they either believe it or they don't. It's the same thing as if they were listening to a person when somebody is reading something, and what they do with that communication and the filter or filters that they put through based on their tone level. So that's why you see such varying degrees of capability in people, is because you're seeing it through the filter of their tone level and all of these different categories in the chart of human abilities, which LRH describes clearly in Science of Survival. That's what you're running into. So you're going through this filter that modifies the waveform, the signal, the electrical signal that's going through, and sometimes it's a sawtooth wave, sometimes it's a squared off wave, and if perfectly, it would be a perfect sine wave where there wasn't any alteration to it. It was actually just a pure sine wave. That's rare, because absolutes are unobtainable, and you want to try and get as close as you can through releasing the case from all of the things that are drawing it down that modify its pure sine wave, or as close to pure as can be as far as tone level. So that's the best way that I can analogize it or describe it to you is that everybody is modified through the lens of the tone level that they're viewing things from, which is modified by their case or lack thereof.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, and some people have their surfax and stuff, and that could just block them from studying things. Well,
right. That's exactly what I was describing. Is that LRH has the definition of a held down key on a calculator, so it's always going to modify the outcome of whatever it is that you're adding or subtracting or dividing, whatever computation that you're doing, so it always comes up with the wrong answer. And what we were talking about earlier, as far as people's, cheeky, snarky type of 1-1 type of behavior that they have as a social tone level, it's a solution to a problem. And that solution to a problem is an apparency of survival to them. They've seen that that's survival to them. Now, what perfect survival and what absolute non-perfect survival is to them doesn't matter. It's just that it gets them by. So that's their computation of what they have to do that's worked for them that helps them get through life. And so you look at that and you go, okay, I see where this person's at. And any auditor who's had any experience in auditing and working with people, or any salesman that's had any experience in talking to people, they're going to know, okay, well, this is where this person's at. They've got some secondaries here. They've got a few engrams here. Da, da, da. And, it's easy to see. You can plot it all out kind of in a mental image picture that you mock up, and you go, okay, here's the solution to their solution, because it isn't a solution. It's just getting them by. It's sort of like putting on the donut tire in place of the tire. You can't drive on it forever, but it still gets you to where you're going. Maybe not comfortably, maybe not forever, but it still gets you there. And that's the way they go through their whole life, is doing that sort of thing. And that's what Scientology resolves, both from the standpoint of basic courses or even pro courses. They all do the same thing, just in smaller doses.
All right, we're coming towards the end, so I want to get some fast answers to this. So,
okay, quick.
Yeah. Montauk, do you have any cool info about that?
Well, as far as the Montauk stuff goes, all I know is what I've read. A lot of it rings true. Beyond that, that's all I can say. It sounds real to me. I mean, it's not that I believe it. It rings true.
Yeah, it's not like, everything about it's true, but like there's some stuff there that's got to be true, and there's some out there stuff that went on there.
Yeah, and it's ironic that a lot of the stuff that went on there was priorly. Let's see, this was in the 70s or 80s, so
70s, yeah.
40 or 50, 60 years later, between 50 and 60 years prior, was the same place where Nikola Tesla's laboratory was. So.
Oh, really? Did he have a lab there?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, what a coinkydink.
When do you think we first went to the moon?
Long before we ever did, back in the late 60s and early 70s.
No, when you say long, how many years are you talking?
I can't answer that question directly given the audience. So, all I can say is this isn't the first time this cycle of action, this society has occurred. Let's put it that way.
Well, do you think the Atlanteans were the ones who built the pyramids?
No.
Okay.
I don't. I think the Atlanteans are a construct more than anything, and I think it's more of an implant than it is a real thing. That's just my own opinion, though.
But what about the Greek god stories of, human-looking tall guys and stuff?
Oh, you mean like the skeletons that they found and things like that? Well, I think that's pretty demonstrable that sort of thing existed. And, as time has gone on the track, things used to be a lot bigger than they are now, and for whatever reason, and things seem to be, as time goes on down the track, they seem to be condensing. And not just in condensing as far as in impact and density, but in size as well. That's what I've seen on my own track.
You gave a really juicy answer to that moon question. Can I have a modern answer to it?
A modern answer?
Yeah, like a NASA sort of answer. Like, when did NASA first go there?
I don't think NASA first went there. If anything, I think the Nazis probably did.
Oh, I was going to ask you, I was going to say, do you subscribe to that? Because it was funny, because we were talking about Einstein earlier, and I heard that they just threw out Einstein's books because he was Jewish, and that enabled them to actually invent some really out there technology, because they didn't have this stop, like that you can't do it.
Yeah, well, for all of the horrible things that the Nazis did, they still had the German influence, and they as far as technologically, they were light years ahead of anything that anybody else was doing on the planet at the time. And I think that they probably had some help on that. And I've read some things to that degree, but I suspect that before I read those things that they had some influences. So that wouldn't surprise me one bit. And I've even read that the swastika was something that was an off-world symbol that they sort of said, that's pretty cool. Can we use that? It wouldn't surprise me.
So
it wouldn't surprise me one bit.
That's. Are you talking about the Indians or the Nazis who?
Well, the Nazis are the ones that used the actual swastika, the kind of spinning wheel sort of thing.
Yeah, but I'm saying that they got that from the Indians, but are you saying the Indians got it from off-world?
Yeah. I think it came from off-world.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. The stories of the...
Similar to the trilateral symbol, which is an off-world symbol as well. So, it's the symbology of things it's ridiculous how far down the track it goes, because that's the whole thing. The symbology, the symbol itself is the thing that re-stimulates the ideas that the symbol represents. So this is one of these things that's passed down a long way down the track. And that's, it's, that alone is why we find ourselves in the trap that we find ourselves in now, is because of that re-stimulator of symbols, because of the implantedness of it and the significance of things. It's a very powerful thing. And I'm not saying that from something outside of Scientology. I'm saying it's all Scientology, because symbols are everything to everything. Words are symbols. Concepts are defined by their symbols, and that's why the swastika or the trilateral symbol are so important today on this planet, along with the Freemasonry signs and the capstone with the eye and all of that stuff. This is how this whole thing works on the track, with especially the guys below 2.0 on the tone scale.
It sounds like you would like Gaia then, because it seems like the Gaia stuff talks about the Nazis and moon bases and stuff.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways, lots of different sources, a lot of cross-description of things that are the same thing, and people are just describing them from their viewpoint. They're adding in their own personal considerations to it, or their own case. I think that's the biggest thing. Is a lot of the stuff that you see in the New Age book section, stuff like that, at Barnes & Noble or, on Amazon, whatever your favorite bookstore is. A lot of this stuff is a particular person's spin on the same thing that's described in 19 other places. And there isn't that much data out there. It's just that there's all these different spins that are put on it with this added inapplicable information, this somebody's viewpoint on it, or whatever their case is on it, blah, 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 blah. And if you just distilled it down, it just comes down to about, a handful of different things. And that's all that it is. Like you said, the physical universe isn't that complex. The only thing that's complex in the physical universe is the reactive mind and what it does to the physical universe. That's my answer.
I've looked at a lot of things, but I can't subscribe to the Nazi sort of flying saucer thing. Like, I think they might have had some sort of craft and done a little bit in Argentina and Antarctica, but it's just, I don't know. I can't find much good info on it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the stuff was mothballed or stolen or whatever. I think I think the main reason that the war ended so quickly when it went on for so long is the fact that they knew these guys were getting to the point that they were going to be unstoppable and they had to do something about it. And the Nazis were a creation of a handful of very wealthy individuals. And they created their own monster, and the monster almost got out of their hands and got out of control and escaped the zoo that they created for it. And so they had to stop it, and they stopped it suddenly because it was becoming something that was becoming a leviathan that they could no longer contain. That's why the war ended as quickly as it did, and all those guys, von Braun and all of his co-workers were whisked off and brought here to the States, and then that's how they got started with NASA. So, you know, that's pretty clear, I think, to a lot of people that that's what happened. And in the last 110 years, there's an unprecedented increase in technology that was never heretofore seen in any time in recorded history. We've come so much more further than any other period in history.
Yeah. It's
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And there's only one reason for that. And I think it's obvious without saying.
Whether it's given voluntarily or it's been shot down.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And, you know, I used to, just like you, I used to be extremely into, you know, alien races and and this and all that. And the fact of the matter is it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. The reason is they're there. That's all there is to it. Will you see them? Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. Is it going to change your day-to-day life? Is it going to change your life in the next 5 years? Probably not. Don't get stuck on it because it's a trap. That's all there is to it. What's going on here on this scale, on this planet, is the same bullshit that's going on out there in space with these guys. The only difference is they have either faster than light travel or they can bend space and time to get from point A to point B. Whether they have that technology or not doesn't mean a goddamn thing because they're just as fucked up as we are in most of these societies. Not all, but most of them. And they don't have any more of the answers beyond the technology to travel from one place to another. And they're looking for them. And they're using us in order to try and find them. We are the cattle in their farm pen. And we can't allow that to happen. Because it's not okay and it violates the laws of humanity throughout the universe. That's all there is to it. Anything else is just bullshit. Don't get caught up in it. It's mostly speculation and it's disinformation. That was my realization.
Well, it's pretty wild when you listen to like Al Bielik's story and then you listen to Art Bell interviewing him, and Art Bell knows a bit about the electronic side of point of view and radio sort of.
Yeah.
And just this, you listen to Al Bielik and you're like, this guy doesn't really sound like he's lying, and you're like, and he's backing up with like correct stuff, and you're like, this is such a wild story.
Yeah. Well, the thing is back when the internet was first starting, back in like, as far as the popular internet, not the scientific internet, when the popular mainstream internet was getting going through America Online and things like that, even through BBSs back in the late 80s. You know, there was a lot more true information on the internet as to what was going on than there is now. And it's been so sanitized and so homogenized and so distilled and redistilled and rehomogenized and resanitized. All of the really good data, for the most part, has been shut down. It isn't there anymore. When you've got behemoths like Google and Microsoft out there sanitizing this stuff and not putting the things on the internet that the government or they and the government, or the powers that be, whoever you want to say, don't want to have on there, you're not going to find it. It may be out there, but you're not going to find it because there isn't going to be anything pointing to it. You're wasting your time, honestly. I mean, that's just the honest to God truth, because a lot of the truth has been wiped off of the internet, and with all of the legislation that's been passed in the last year as far as the internet goes and what they can put on there and who they can throttle and who they can't, it's just going to get worse. The best thing you can do is get your ass up the bridge. That's honest to God truth, and that's my viewpoint. I'm sorry if it seems, one-sided or anything like that, but it's really not, because a lot of the truth isn't out there on the internet anymore. It's just not to be found.
Just quickly, orbs. Do you believe them? Because I posted a video recently on my channel that shows footage, security footage, like CCTV. You can see orbs move across. Do you reckon it's Statins?
Yeah. We're actually doing some beginning research on this whole thing, as far as orbs are kind of the starting, jumping off point. A lot of the earlier technology that we had back in the 90s, coming up to the aughts and then the teens, the technology was modified so that this stuff couldn't be seen anymore. There used to be CCD chips that could see the orbs really well, and you could see the faces in the orbs and everything.
Whoa!
And, yeah, that Sony made them. I had them back in the early 2000s. I had a Sony camera that was made up with one of these actual CCD chips, and now they don't make them anymore, and you have to buy them on eBay and things like that. They're ghost hunter applications. So they're still available, but their longevity is waning because the stuff only lasts so long. But yeah, orbs. I think orbs are. I don't believe in them. I know that that's what they are. I mean, it's obvious. I understand it now. I didn't as much then, but I got lots of pictures with them. And it's not your eye just seeing what you want to see. It's just the fact that they're there. You can see it. And we're doing some research with some of the higher end ghost hunting devices. There's one that uses one of the camera and CPUs for the Xbox. They don't make them anymore. Like if you were doing DDR or anything that required the camera to plot your body out. We're doing some research that we'll be publishing hopefully within the next few months that actually proves what LRH was talking about. This is directly related to the orbs, that a person can mock things up in the physical universe. It's just the body can't see them. Well, these ghost hunting applications, like the one that comes from the Xbox, actually can see your mock-ups and plot them out on a camera that you can see them. There's an actual ghost hunter application that does this. And also on top of that, we will prove that these disembodied things are actually there, and you can see them in session while you're auditing as they leave the body and come onto the body, etc., etc. And nobody's done this before, but we're going to do it.
Wow, that sounds so cool. So with the footage that I posted on my channel, if I was there at that specific moment, do you think my eyes would pick up on the orb, or it's only the security camera that could pick up on it?
Well, the thing is your eye only sees an extremely narrow bandwidth in the light spectrum. That's what these electronic devices can pick up, is they have a much wider range that they can see depending on what part or parts, if they're a composite, in the visible light spectrum and beyond. So there's still a lot more developments that can be done, but I don't think that, you might be able to perceive them, and OT can perceive them. So I can't say, no, you would never perceive them. And I'm not saying you necessarily have to be an OT. A lot of people have OT abilities and they aren't OT. So, that really kind of goes outside of the scope. But the thing is, you may be able to perceive them, but you may not be able to see them with the physical eye.
Yeah. It's just that in this house, though, my friend saw a ghost in the house for a few seconds. It just looked like an actual person. That's the person who passed away in the house. And then I got the security camera footage of the orb. And so I was thinking, either if I was there with my own eyes, either I would see nothing, or I would see the actual man, or I would see the golden ball. I don't know which one.
Yeah, as far as that stuff goes, it just depends on what they're capable of manifesting and what type of power source they have, because it requires a tremendous amount of energy for them to manifest stuff. So I don't know how much of it, I couldn't really say how much of it was your inability to be able to see it, or if it was their inability to actually manifest it. So, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself on that end, because it requires a lot of effort for them to manifest in the physical universe.
I got a question. If can you go PTS from being connected to someone who has gone PTS? I imagine if you're an empathic sort of person, you're more likely that this could possibly happen. Have you heard about this happening?
You mean going PT, being around somebody who's PTS and then going PTS,
and then you go
yourself?
PTS to them because you're an empath?
I would have to say that happens a lot. There's a reference where LRH says that a person will make mistakes around a PTS person. But the whole thing is the only reason that a person goes PTS is because they've committed an overt against somebody who is either the suppressor or reminds them of an earlier suppressor. And that's it. So if you don't commit an overt on somebody, you don't go PTS to them. There were people that worked close to Hitler and never had a problem with him ever, and that was that, because they never committed an overt with him. They kept their ethics in, yet they worked alongside an SP. They never got sick or anything like that. Now, that's not to say they weren't misguided, but they sure as hell weren't PTS. So, that's the modifier on the whole thing, is whether they committed an overt. But, you can make lots of mistakes around a person who is PTS, and you can ultimately go PTS to their PTSness. I've actually handled that in session before.
Yeah, people. That makes sense. What do you think of the guy who thinks he's LRH?
No comment.
None at all?
No. I don't want to go there.
Not even like, I don't know, or something? I mean, I like no comment. That sounds really interesting.
You do the math.
Well, that's a comment, so you said something.
I said you do the math.
Yeah, so you said something on it. So I wanted to ask you before we end off about some online drama you had. Because when I interviewed you and...
that's what prompted us to do a whole other podcast months ago. So
yeah,
the long and the short of it is, what really happened is that I believe it was really just a situation of somebody got on our lines that we had done an OCA with, and was basically a social OCA, where it was just, they were just saying what they wanted to think that they were, and it wasn't caught by us, and these things happen. And like Ellery says, there's only two things you can be guilty of: over or underestimation of effort, and then the other thing is being there and communicating. So we were guilty of that on both counts, and I underestimated the amount of effort. There was a tremendous amount of third party from individuals who are PTS themselves in the field to other sources that, like Scott Gordon has brought up in his podcast with you before. There is the tremendous groundswell of, for lack of a better expression, forces that are trying to destroy the independent field at large, and this was one of those situations where we.
So did you have an OSA agent come to you and pretend to get audited, or did you have someone who was a legitimate PC but had gone PDS to an OSA agent?
I think that was probably more the case, and that they also withheld the fact that they had received auditing from other people who were less than standard in their technical prowess, who passed themselves off as being standard when they were not, and they dallied around with their case, didn't tell us about it, and we opened up a can of worms that we weren't aware of. No matter doing a DFP or anything like that, if somebody doesn't know something is wrong, you're not going to spot it on the meter. You're just not, because they don't know. And that was what happened, and it was very much a learning experience for us. And we found out who we could trust, who we could not trust, and there are Class 8s out there that should not be allowed to audit. I'm not saying any particular names. I'm not pointing any fingers, but the field has some serious problems with their Class 8s, and that's one of the things that pushed me to go ahead and get on the Class 8 course. Because I intend to keep Scientology alive. I intend to keep Scientology working and doing the best that we can do to keep Scientology on the map, because it is eroding rapidly in the field. And this situation, is making lemonade out of lemons, in other words. I'm glad that it happened in the end, because it really opened my eyes to how bad things were, and that we needed to do something about it with others too.
Wow, so in summary, you started auditing someone and it was a lot more than what you thought it would be, and there was all these dramas, and there was possible OSA agents involved, and also people who are also sires who are doing out tech, and there was just all this drama and all this crap. And then now when I interview you, someone sent me and wrote some comments like, "Oh, John's a bad guy," and mentioned this story. Right.
I mean, that's the whole thing. LR8 says you're doing a good job when the SPs come out of the woodwork, because you're making some headway, and that's how we looked at it. And the person that we had the problem with had no problem at all with their auditing. Cried. They were so happy with the outcome. Were VVGIs. No problems at all. 3 weeks later, a particular Class 8, so-called Class 8 in the field, got on their lines and started third-partying them against us. And, I mean, the field is a mess. And there's no qual out there to handle them. We're not perfect either. We're not claiming to be perfect. But we try our hardest and our best to be as standard as we can, and we will be putting a qual in our new organization that we're opening this month here in Kansas City. So we're opening a brick-and-mortar org here in the United States.
Oh, wow, cool. What are you going to call it? Just the Advanced Org, or are you going to call it like a Life Improvement Center?
Yeah, just the Advanced Org of the Great Plains.
All right. Wow, that's cool. So you're not going to be traveling around anymore?
No, we're not going to travel around. If somebody needs us to come do something, short period things, we'll be able to do that sort of a thing, but we just have to plan for it ahead of time. But we're going to be sticking with a brick and mortar org, and all of the courses will be delivered through our online course room. Students can study at home. They can study in the course room online. We're going to have IMAX in the course room where they can study and actually have their check sheet on the computer, so we can see how much time they're spending on each reference, what words they look up, the whole 9 yards. We have a word clearer in the course room so that they can get their meter checks to make sure that their recent study checks is what they're called. False data stripping, all of that. We'll have an examiner. We'll have, everything that an org has. And it's opening this month.
Okay, so where will it be?
It'll be here in Kansas City, Missouri.
All right, so Kansas City is going to have their own indie org.
Yep, and an advanced org that'll deliver everything through OT8 and Class 8.
That sounds good.
So, that's the plan.
And if someone doesn't have their own computer to study with, you're going to provide computers or something?
Well, we're going to have computers in the course room. We're going to have IMAX in the course room and laptops so that they can actually have their check sheets in front of them. All of our online courses have all of the references on the check sheet. They don't have to go looking for anything. They don't need a course pack. The course pack is the check sheet. The check sheet is a course pack. We can see what they're on, give them a target, see how much time they spend on each thing. We know what words they need to look up, what words they have looked up, all that stuff. So it's a completely new 21st century course room that changes everything, but yet changes nothing at the same time. It stays right along with what LRH intended as far as study tech, getting people through things. We'll still have all the practical drills and everything are on the check sheets, but yet the student can take the check sheet home with them and they can study at home and then come in and get checked out, star rated, method forward, high crime, whatever they're doing, whether they're doing an internship, whatever, all online. And that way you don't have to have a physical check sheet anymore, but it's, in the digital realm. So go ahead.
So the best way to study a course is in person in a course room, and so you're setting it up so that you sign up for these online courses and stuff, but if you're in Kansas City, you can actually come into the org and study it.
That's right. And you can do everything that you would do in a normal course room, from mood drills to TRs to upper indocs to meter drills, everything. Just like a regular course room, except that your check sheet will be on the computer, on the laptop. You can bring your own laptop in. We have a 400 gigabit internet service through Google. It's going to be a different medium that the tech is on, and we're also going to have a full qual library that's completely digitized. Anything can be printed up at any time, and the student can have a hard copy on it. And we're not violating any copyrights because we're not selling the materials. We're selling the actual supervision itself. So there's no issue there. We're not selling the materials at all. We're just selling the supervision. We're selling the qual. We're selling the examiner. We're, all of these hats. That's what we're selling. So that's it.
Yeah, because when I was studying a data evaluators course, I was thinking that if someone's new to Scientology, it's going to, I don't know how they would go with studying online. Like if you're a seasoned Scientologist, you can totally do it fine, but if you're new to it, you kind of do need you need the assistance from the soup all the time,
Sure, I don't disagree at all. It's a stopgap measure. It's a bootstrap measure. That's what it is. It's just to get people get enough data that they go, God damn, I need to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this in person. That sort of thing. And if somebody can't get to an org, you can get through it. We can check out your clay demos. We can do meter drill checkout. We can do meter drills over the internet. We can do star rate checkouts. I do them every couple of days with people. So, it can be done, but nothing replaces face-to-face, one-on-one course room supervision. And we're not trying to change that. We're not trying to belittle it, blaspheme that, or anything like that. We're just trying to give people options to get the tech out there till we can get them in a physical brick-and-mortar course room. That's all we're trying to do.
I think this sounds great because it sounds like in Europe they've got some good stuff going on, but America there's a lot of like OSA activity and stuff, and it's really wrecked a lot of independent Scientology. So it'd be good to get this going well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is people need to take a stand and they need to create course rooms, and it's very much a you build it and they will come. To steal from what was the baseball movie? I can't think of remember the name with Kevin Costner, but build it and they will come.
Yeah,
and that's the whole idea. Is if you put it there and you let people know, you don't even have to spend a lot of money or any money on it. Just let people know. Field of Dreams. Thank you. Field of Dreams is the movie. So that's what you have to do. Is you have to put it there. If you put it there, people will show up and the flows will come in. There are people that want it and they're right on the cusp. You just have to put it there for them.
That's apparently a Mandela effect. Apparently now it's build it and he will come.
Right.
Which is just, again, another weird change that doesn't quite make sense because it's like build it and he will come.
Right.
All right. Well, so if you want to sign up for a course, you go to the advanced org of the Great Plains.com. Is it?
What you do if you want to do an online course, we've got several free courses, basic study manual. We've got several of the original VMH, Volunteer Minister's Handbook, course check sheets that we'll be putting on in the next few weeks that are all basic courses. We also have a basic TRs course for free. Technically speaking, you could do the DSEC. We have a $99 subscription that is for 30 days. And
how can you charge money? You're a religion. It should be free.
Well, tell the Catholic Church that. It costs money to have a server that uses electricity, that pushes electrons and all of that. But when you're charging $99 a month for the DSEC course, the Data Evaluators course, and the check sheet time is 2 weeks full-time, 4 weeks part-time, you can get that course for less than $100. That's over a $2,000 course in the Church of Scientology.
Hold on. Are they still delivering that course?
I don't know if they are or not. I really don't. All I remember is that at one point it was over $2,000 for the Data Evaluators course. So, that's a ridiculously cheap price.
It is,
and anybody that whines about the fact that we're charging any money for this stuff doesn't belong in our course room, and we don't want to.
I can't believe you're offering the BSM for free.
Yeah, the BSM has always been free in the church.
Don't people coming into Div 6 have to pay to do the BSM?
Well, I don't know now. I mean, I've been out since 2004, so I don't have a lot of data on that. I just know what I've heard and what I knew when I was in. So it's kind of stale data. Well,
but I know that if you're joining staff, you might get it for free, but I don't know if a public would just get it for free.
They may not, but at one point in time, BSM, at least back in the 80s and the 90s and even the early aughts, BSM was a free course. It was a Div 6 study course.
Yeah, anyway, that's a great course. What was I going to say? I think that the way to run these orgs and these missions and stuff is to run it with the profit incentive, and I think that's when they went awesome, when they're in the late 70s and people were running them like businesses, and they were like McDonald's, but selling great courses.
Yeah, well, I mean, originally missions were called franchises.
Yeah.
LRH had it set up as a franchise. The biggest and most successful organizations prior to the 339R, the birthday program, were not Class 5 or Class 4 orgs. They were missions. These were places that were small places that somebody had bought basically a franchise to deliver Scientology. Kansas City, for example, was booming in the early to mid 70s, late 70s. And then with the Mission Holders Conference, they scuttled it, and there was one guy left. And everybody's PC folders were in one guy's garage. That's how bad it got, when there were hundreds of people on lines and doing courses. I mean, you could barely fit in the building. They were basically like burgeoning out the doors. I remember seeing it as a kid. So, those were the successful actions, and that's what we're going to be doing here, is doing that again. And we're going to make Scientology affordable at 1970s rates. We're going to make Scientology fun. We've already made it fun. And we're going to put the spirit of what LRH intended back into this whole thing and get people through courses and really winning and enjoying the subject again, and not making it suppressive, but making it light and airy and just thrilling to be around, and to be in a social circle where everybody gets along and likes to help one another. And co-audits. That's what we're doing. Yeah,
and if you promote near like a university or something, because people between the ages of 18 and 25 really gravitate to Scientology, especially with the BSM teaching them how to study. I mean, I reckon you could boom it.
Yeah, that's right. So some of the most successful actions for the small missions back in the 70s were to give tickets out to a free
lecture
speaker. lecture where he would go up on stage and talk about Scientology basics and things like that. So we'll be implementing those things at some point. It's just a matter of the ratio of number of people that we have as to what we can do and what we can handle. We don't want to bring in more people than we can handle and deliver bad service. So we kind of have to do it in a proportional sort of way.
Yeah.
But, we can deliver both sides of the bridge, and there's nobody holding us back on the whole thing, because all we're doing is just delivering the services that people provide. The materials themselves are on the internet for free.
All right. Well, thanks for speaking to me, John. That was good.
You bet. Thank you very much for having me, Andy. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a nice long one, and you didn't drop as many bombs, but it was still pretty interesting. You did drop some bombs, though.
I've only got so many bombs. You got to give me more time to get more data and stuff like that. But we have some pretty cool stuff coming around the corner in the next few months that maybe we can do podcasts with when we actually introduce the documentation for it.
Yeah, well, and I think that when you say no comment, that is almost a bomb in itself. Yeah.
No comment. So that's all I have to say about that.
All right. Okay, see ya.
All right, take care.
All right, so that was a long interview with Johnathan Burke from the Advanced Organization of the Great Plains. And I think it's exciting that his organization is going to be at a permanent location. It's not really going to be the traveling mission that it was. I think that's cool. I like the idea of there being more indie orgs. It also is cool, the idea of having a traveling mission, especially with these nice tiny homes that you can see. These cool tiny homes. But really, the coolest tiny homes are ones that aren't really portable. They can be towed and stuff, but they're usually just massively big, and they're, big for a tiny home, and they're just artsy and really cool, but they're not really for traveling. Anyway, it is time to finish the podcast, but before I end off, we're going to end off with a quote, an LRH quote, and this is probably my favorite quote of all L. Ron Hubbard quotes. So get ready for this, and I chose this specifically because of some of the out there stuff that Johnathan talked about, the outer space stuff in today's interview. And this is my favoritist quote, and so I'm going to read it out now. All right. There is nothing as wild in the books of man as will probably happen here on Earth. It will happen and be allowed to happen simply because all this is so incredible that nobody will even think of stopping it until it's far, far too late. It's a really deep quote. It's really true. There's stuff going on, and he wrote this back then, but because what do you say? He goes, as will probably happen. So firstly, already when he said this quote, and this is why he said it, it was like back in the 60s or 70s when wild stuff was really starting to happen here on Earth, and L. Ron Hubbard knew about some of this stuff. But it's really applicable to nowadays, because now all this stuff's being actually actually acting. Right now, just completely wild stuff is going on that people just can't believe. For example, I think it's possible that they're doing full-scale weather modification regularly over cities. I think they're creating clouds, they're doing stuff, and they're just not telling anyone about it. The whole chemtrail thing, the whole geoengineering thing, that's just one thing. But then what about the aliens working in underground bases with the military? There's so much wild stuff going on that people just cannot believe it. You can't, it's just like, whoa. And then you've got the Mandela effect. And that could be because somebody's actually worked out how to control the Matrix or this computer game we're living in, and they're actually making changes. Or maybe it's time travel. Maybe it's time travel changes, and they're changing something in the past, and then suddenly the line in that movie is different, whereas everyone's like, oh, I thought it was, Luke, I am your father, but now it's, no, I am your father. I mean, you obviously can't understand what I'm talking about unless you've studied the Mandela effect. But it's not a load of rubbish. I'm just seeing too many things that indicate it's the truth of what's going on. The actual truth is just so wild, so incredible. People just can't believe it, and things will just go really, really wild. Like, this quote is just fantastic because it summarizes life is just absolutely incredible, and what's possible and what is going on here on Earth is just absolutely incredible. And this is what he's touching on in this quote. So I'm going to read it out again just because it's so amazing. There is nothing as wild in the books of man as will probably happen here on Earth. It will happen and be allowed to happen simply because all this is so incredible that nobody will even think of stopping it until it's far, far too late. There's just incredible stuff going on, and that whole line, truth is stranger than fiction. It really, really is. And another reason why I want to use this quote as well is because I notice personal Mandela effects in my life, like things like I'll go to yoga class, and so in yoga you're lying on your back, so you're looking at the ceiling, so you're a bit aware of what's on the ceiling, and I'll notice every now and then suddenly the ceiling will be different, and I'll be like, what the hell? And then I'll ask the people if they'd had renovations or if they'd put new lights in or new fans in, and they'll be like, nah, and it doesn't look like they're new fans or whatever. But I'll be like, wow, I never remember there being fans on the ceiling, and now suddenly there's fans. And then another time I'll come and go, wow, I don't ever remember there being 4 manholes on the ceiling. And the reason why I'd remember manholes is because I used to work going through manholes. So if I'm lying on my back doing yoga, I would look up and I would see manhole. I mean, I'm going to notice it more than someone who's like an accountant who doesn't think about these sort of things. And there's 4 of them. So I was like, whoa, usually there's just 1 manhole. So I would have noticed something odd like that. I would have been like, wow, there's 4 manholes on this ceiling. Anyway, so I came in one day into yoga and I looked on my back, and I was on my back, and I looked at the ceiling, and there was 4 manholes, and I was like, what the hell? And other little things like the lights changing and the clock moving positions and stuff. And I'm noticing these things. And then just today I was watching a video, and I've watched it a few times before, and this time it was different. And I was like, this is, again, the same situation. I was like, this is the same video. It's like it's the same thing, but it's not quite the same. It's different. It had like some different angles that it was filmed, and it was just, and what happened in the video was slightly different. It was just like, what the hell? Like, there's something going on. There's something really wild. I don't know what's going on, but there's just whatever's, like, it's so incredible, the truth. It's so out there. I just wanted to mention that. So in your personal life, I don't know if it's just people who are awakened notice the Mandela effect, because I did speak to a lady who seemed awakened, and apparently she was being abducted by aliens as well, and I believed her. Like, she had good information, and the Navy was studying her and stuff, or like trying to protect her or something. I'd love to interview her for my Flying Saucer Radio, but a lot of the time they just want to keep to themselves. But she said that she notices the Mandela effect as well in her own personal life, like not just the movie line thing, but she notices, like, you know, suddenly that wall that was always white will now be like cream coloured, and you'll be like, what the hell, that wall's changed. And like little stuff like that. It's just interesting. But I just want to mention, if you do suddenly notice something that's different, you're like, oh, that, I don't ever remember there being an opening door. I thought it was a sliding door. Like odd little changes to the matrix like that, and you just think that you're remembering them wrongly. I would just remember them and take note of them and see if you notice in your own life that you're changing into some sort of parallel universe. And there's all this evidence of parallel universes, but I noticed that I'm changing into parallel universes. And it could have something to do with all the spiritual work I've done. I mean, I remember when I first noticed the Mandela effect. Well, actually, I remember the Sex and the City Mandela effect, but that's one that everyone's going through. In my own personal life, though, I first noticed the Mandela effect while I was doing my objective auditing probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And I was on a break and I was drinking water at the water fountain, and there was this doorway in the Melbourne Org, and it was one of those doorways where it was in a corridor, and the way the building used to be, clearly there used to be a door there, but there was just a frame for it and there was no door. And even if there was a door there, you would always have it open anyway. But it was just like a door frame. You know, you could tell because they renovated an old building to build the Ideal Org. And so one day I came in to have this break, and it's an area that I'm familiar with because you're having heaps of breaks and you're standing and waiting around while someone goes to the toilet, and objective auditing takes a while. So you're aware of the corridor and the hallway and stuff. Anyway, and I noticed that suddenly this doorway thing actually had a door on it that was wedged open. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, I never remember there being a door attached to that. And you think, oh, well, you know, maybe the door's just always been opened up and you've been walking through it and you've just never noticed it because the door's always open. But I don't think so. I think this was like a legitimate Mandela effect of something odd changing in my universe. It's like, what? And at that time, I think I noticed one or two other things that had changed, that were a little bit interesting. But anyway, the truth is just so wild. So that's it for today's show. It's time for you to climb back out of this rabbit hole, out of this interesting Scientology world. Thanks for listening. I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You have been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.